A boy appears in the virtual reality game Fantasy Defense. He is the youngest son of a prestigious swordsman family, and his name is Celterion Marquis. Celterion is one of the characters from his family involved in major early game events. However, during an event involving the main protagonist, he is badly beaten and dies pitifully after being struck down by a minion summoned by a villain, killed in a single blow, and everyone assumes he was just an insignificant extra. And that character, whose story is told above, is our boy. Our boy looks into the mirror, smiles awkwardly, and pinches his cheeks, wincing in pain. He's testing to see if he's dreaming, but since it hurts, he realizes this is all too real. He places his hands on the mirror, struggling to understand how he ended up inside a virtual reality game. Our boy, Lee Hyun-woo, cries in disbelief. He can't accept that he, who once ranked first in the world for Fantasy Defense, has now become this worthless character. Fantasy Defense, the virtual reality game that will take the world by storm in 2030, has completely turned his life upside down. The game had such a devilish level of difficulty that no one had cleared it, even after 10 years. However, this very challenge and the game's addictive nature kept it popular. Players earn points in the global rankings based on how they play and complete quests, with rare quests and items significantly boosting their scores. Our boy says that's why, for 10 years in real life, he had been completely immersed in Fantasy Defense. After mastering everything, from rare magic circles to legendary crafting combinations, he achieved an overwhelming score. He was truly a living legend of the game, the top-ranked global player, Lee Hyun-woo. Our boy sighs as he reflects on his current situation, realizing that he's now inhabiting the body of an ordinary character. He wonders how he will survive in this world, especially since even the main protagonist, with the best talents, couldn't clear the game. As he sits idly on his bed, he recalls Celterion's fate, a character whose story he knows all too well from playing the game countless times. Our boy then explains that the ultimate goal in Fantasy Defense is to stop the forces of darkness. The one who summoned these dark forces was the second son of the Celterion family, Adol. In an attempt to usurp the head of the family, Adol sought the power of darkness to incite a rebellion. As a result, the Celterion territory became a base for the dark forces who had long coveted human lands. In the ensuing chaos, the incompetent and powerless Celterion, our boy, ran into the territory and was killed by a villain. Now, in the present, our boy sighs with regret, realizing that he could have simply left the territory before the rebellion began. However, he recognizes a bigger issue. This character has a disease called Hermumu. Our boy grows sad as he looks at his hand, and we learn that Hermumu is a condition in which the mana channels within the body are blocked. In this game world, mana is the source of both aura and magic, as well as the essential energy needed for survival. Those with blocked mana channels, known as Hermumu patients, cannot absorb the nutrients required for life and growth, and most die before reaching the age of 20. Our boy looks at his hands, reflecting on the fact that the only cure for Hermumu is to absorb mana from nature into the body. However, since the mana channels are blocked, absorbing mana is impossible. In other words, being diagnosed with Hermumu is essentially a death sentence. Celterion, diagnosed at a young age, fell into deep despair. After his diagnosis, was consumed by fear of death, anxiety over his remaining time, and frustration at being unable to fight back. As these thoughts overwhelm him, sweat streams down his face. Eventually, became twisted, and before long, he was regarded as a disgrace to the family. His father instructed him to stay in his room and reflect on his actions. Isolated and gloomy, was ultimately confined to an annex by his father, the head of the Celterion family. Sitting in his room, cries in anger, questioning whether his family sees him as a joke. He feels deeply humiliated, believing they all look down on him. Enraged, throws a chair at the door and screams, wishing they would all just die. His eyes burn with terror, making him appear fierce and desperate. Our boy remains silent, reflecting on all these scenes, thinking that Kyle is beyond hope. He admits that even in the game, he felt Kyle was a lost cause, so rotten that even his terminal illness doesn't evoke any sympathy. Our boy tells us to reassess the situation. The character he's possessed, Kyle Celterion, is the youngest son of a Marquis, but the family is doomed. Kyle has no talent in swordsmanship or magic, and his life expectancy is severely limited due to his illness. He has a terrible personality, a ruined reputation, and has been confined by the family head. Our boy feels hopeless, realizing that he's trapped in a no-win situation. Whether he stays or runs, death seems inevitable. Desperate, he screams in frustration, unable to fathom how he can survive in this world with such terrible stats. He thinks to himself that it's normal for someone to get some sort of cheat ability when they're reincarnated, and he desperately wishes for a status window or something similar as he cries. Suddenly, our boy is shocked to see blue-colored bubbles appearing in his room. Curious, he looks at them, wondering what they are, and reaches out to touch one of the bubbles. Our boy thinks to himself that he has never encountered anything like this before. As he touches the bubble, lightning begins to spark from his hand. Confused, he can't grasp what is happening until a status window suddenly appears in front of him, informing him that he has awakened and has been granted 2 new talents. The status window has now been unlocked, and it also informs him that he can use Insight, which will activate automatically. Shocked and surprised by the appearance of the status window, our boy decides to take a closer look. As he reviews the talents given to him, he notices something called Mana Pathway, but he has no idea what it means. He continues to examine the window and discovers another talent called Mind's Eye, which allows him to see detailed specifications. However, our boy is puzzled by the talent related to mana pathways, as he has never seen anything like it before. He deduces from the name that it seems to be connected to magic, but he is unsure. Confused, he recalls that the best magic talent is supposed to be Mana Companion. Yet, as he examines the status window further, he begins to trust his intuition, sensing that this new talent might be even more extraordinary than Mana Companion. Our boy thinks that Mana Pathways must be a top-tier talent, and a wave of happiness washes over him as he realizes that now, nothing will stop him. He glances at the blue bubbles again, recalling that the best magic talent was always supposed to be Mana Companion, but something deep inside tells him that this talent will be even better. As he touches one of the blue bubbles, a radiant blue light emerges from his hand. He feels a surge of power coursing through him and begins to believe that this must indeed be a top-tier ability. Clenching his fist, our boy becomes more certain. Back when he had the Mana Companion ability, he could never experience anything like this. While watching his hand transform before his eyes, he realizes that this is pure mana energy itself. If he can absorb it properly, mana will flow freely through his body, and according to his will, it will break through his limits. Our boy can feel the blue lightning coursing through his veins. He commands it to move according to his will, discovering that he can control it. Determined to break through the blockage in his mana channels, he shapes the mana into a drill, and it instantly transforms as he wishes. When he commands it to move, it obeys perfectly, flowing exactly as he directs. Overjoyed that it worked as he intended, our boy feels the mana flowing through his veins, though it's only reaching up to his elbow for now. He realizes that if he continues to gather mana and opens the path fully, he might be able to overcome the barrier of Hermamo. Feeling a surge of hope, our boy is elated. He won't die now. Meanwhile, in the territory, a maid finishes preparing lunch and wipes her hands with a towel. She remarks to herself that the meal is ready and decides to take it to Lord Kyle before it gets cold. But before she can leave, 2 other maids approach her, stopping her in her tracks. The maid, whose name is Urgel, looks at them in confusion. The 2 maids, one with green hair and the other with blue, gaze at Urgel with anger. The green-haired maid tells Urgel that they've decided to stop serving Lord Kyle for a while. The green-haired maid explains that they are protesting Kyle's behavior, saying that going hungry for a few days might improve his attitude. She demands that Urgel put the soup down immediately, and the blue-haired maid agrees with her. Urgel looks at them quietly and responds, "You can do whatever you want, but I'll still do my job." Her calm defiance angers both of them. The green-haired maid shouts at Urgel, accusing her of acting self-righteous, asking if she thinks she's the only one trying to be noble. In a fit of rage, she knocks the tray out of Urgel's hands. Urgel is shocked, but before she can react, the green-haired maid sneers, asking if she still thinks she's noble now. The maid continues to berate Urgel, reminding her that after her family's downfall, they sold her as a slave. Despite the insults, Urgel quietly kneels to pick up the fallen dishes, ignoring the green-haired maid's taunts. This silent resistance only fuels her rage. The green-haired maid, now even more furious, seething with anger, she raises her hand to slap Urgel, shouting, "Are you just going to ignore us like this?" Suddenly, someone steps in and asks, "What's going on here?" The green-haired maid turns around to see a young man standing behind her, glaring angrily. Both the green-haired and blue-haired maids are shocked. It's Sir Leonhardt. The green-haired maid is visibly scared, while the blue-haired one nervously asks why Sir Leonhardt is in the kitchen. Sir Leonhardt glances at the meal spilled on the floor and asks, "Is this meal for Lord Kyle?" Internally, he's already pieced together that these maids are giving Urgel trouble. Sternly, he informs them that the meal is already late and orders them to prepare it again, quickly. Urgel, though confused, nods in agreement and begins to collect the meal, while the green and blue-haired maids look annoyed. As Urgel leaves with the food, Sir Leonhardt watches her in silence. Meanwhile, in Kyle's room, our boy is testing his newly discovered talents, insight and mana blockage manipulation. He muses that, with these two abilities, he might actually be able to change the fate of the fallen Marquis family. Our boy reflects that he's been playing fantasy defense for 10 years, giving him knowledge almost like foresight. And now, he's been born into this world with immense power. Our boy contemplates the immense wealth and influence of the Marquis family, realizing that it's not impossible to block the forces of darkness. He looks at the status window and identifies 3 main tasks that require his focus. First, he must clear the mana channels, overcome the barrier of Hermamu, and learn magic. Since mana blockage is closely tied to magic, it makes sense for him to pursue becoming a mage rather than a knight. The second task is to prevent the downfall of the Marquis family. The better the family performs, the better his situation will be. The Celterian Marquis, with its flawed reputation and wealth, can serve as a strong shield for our boy. Additionally, because the territory is located on the outskirts, he won't have to worry about the complexities of capital politics. The final and most crucial task is to gather talented individuals. Our boy acknowledges that to prepare for the major threats posed by the dark forces in the coming years, he will utilize his insight to identify people with potential, bringing them under his influence. These individuals will become reliable allies for him. While contemplating this strategy, our boy states that by building strength, he will undoubtedly survive. Our boy feeling pleased as he reflects that to gather talent, he should start by looking nearby. Considering the Celterian Marquis family, he concludes that Leonhardt would be a good starting point, as he is a valuable tank NPC. While our boy is deep in thought, Urgel enters his room, calling out to him. She informs him that she has brought a meal. As our boy looks at her, memories of their past interactions come to mind. He wonders about her name, but can only recall the first 3 letters. Just then, his insight ability activates, revealing that the target has a low rank. Urgel's essence is probed, and her status window materializes in front of our boy. He is shocked to discover that, with the help of his insight talent, he can access information about others. Urgel's status window reveals that she possesses a talent for Eternal Friend of Spirits in household chores. Our boy is taken aback, struggling to comprehend that the maid has such a remarkable talent, as it is a top-tier spirit summoning ability. Our boy looks at Urgel as she tells him to enjoy his meal before leaving the room. He wonders why a girl with the talent to become a genius spirit summoner is working as a maid in a place like this. The story then flashes back 1 year. At the auction house, the auctioneer gathers the attention of the gentlemen and ladies present, announcing that they have a very special item for sale, something not easily found elsewhere. He explains that they barely managed to bring her to the auction and then reveals the girl. Nervously, she stands before the crowd as the auctioneer introduces her as the 3rd daughter of the fallen Baron Helheim family. She is Urgel. The attendees are taken aback, and the auctioneer continues, stating that despite her noble lineage, she is well-mannered and intelligent. He urges the audience to place their bids. Bidding begins, with offers of 50 gold, 70 gold, and then 90 gold echoing through the hall. Sir Leonhardt sits nearby and advises Lord Kyle to leave, remarking that slave auctions are not worth watching. However, Kyle interrupts the conversation by bidding 300 gold for Urgel, leaving Leonhardt in shock. Leonhardt urges Kyle to reconsider his decision. The auctioneer announces the bid of 300 gold and inquires if anyone is willing to bid higher. Leonhardt questions Kyle, asking if he truly wants to buy a slave and wonders what his father would think about it. Angry, Kyle yells at Leonhardt to stop nagging him, asserting that he will spend his money as he wishes and that his father doesn't care about his choices. Despite Leonhardt's desire to intervene, Kyle begins to walk forward, and the auctioneer declares that the slave is sold for 300 gold. Kyle approaches Urgel, who stands there with her hands cuffed. He looks at her, and with a piercing gaze into her soul, he declares that she is now his. Kyle removes Urgel's cuffs and tells her that she is free now. He explains that she is no longer a slave since he has purchased her, and now she can go wherever she wishes. Urgel looks at him as he turns to leave. She stands there, contemplating her newfound freedom, but then recalls Kyle's words declaring that she belongs to him. As Kyle walks away, he notices Urgel stopping him by holding onto the cuff of his sleeve. She tells him that she will follow him. Confused, Kyle responds that she is free to do whatever she wants and continues on his way. In the present, our boy reflects on these memories while eating his lunch, realizing that they are actually Kyle's memories. He understands that the reason Urgel became a maid for the Marquis family was that Kyle took her in when she was on the verge of being sold as a slave after her family's downfall. Our boy feels a sense of empathy for Urgel, recognizing that she has endured so much at such a young age. He wonders if he has truly merged with Kyle, as he considers the emotions Kyle harbored towards Urgel. The feelings are vivid and profound. Our boy feels a shared sense of abandonment from the world, coupled with a lack of control over his fate. He takes a bite of his lunch, his eyes lighting up as he asks Urgel if she made it herself. Worried, Urgel asks with a trembling voice if something is wrong with the food. Our boy assures her that it is delicious and praises her cooking skills. He smiles and requests that she make this dish for him again next time. Urgel is taken aback, but eventually agrees with him. Our boy notices her affection for him, which shows a score of 35. He reflects on their dramatic encounter, thinking that it isn't a particularly high affection score. Given his delinquent behavior, he considers it a miracle that Urgel still holds any affection at all. Our boy recalls that in Fantasy Defense, there was no spirit mage NPC named Urgel. He suspects she must have been caught in the internal rebellion of the Marquis family and died before her talents as a spirit mage could truly blossom. Determined, our boy resolves that he will not let that happen this time. He refuses to allow such a valuable talent to slip away right before his eyes. Our boy asks Urgel if she has ever considered learning spirit magic. Urgel responds with curiosity, admitting that she knows nothing about spirit magic. Our boy explains that he believes she might have some talent for it. She remains silent, looking at him with confusion, and expresses that she has never imagined having any talent for spirit magic. Our boy realizes that it seems she has never encountered spirit magic even in her family home. He understands that spirit magic is known to be particularly expensive, likely something a lower-ranked noble family could not afford to teach her. Our boy thinks he will need to address this matter later. He encourages her to start considering it, assuring her that she will learn it soon. Urgel hesitates, and our boy insists that there is no option to refuse. He gets off the bed and stands in front of her, stating that she must follow his words. Urgel looks into his eyes, still confused. Our boy reassures her with a smile, telling her that she is his person now. To his satisfaction, he notices that her affection for him has increased to 50. A few days later, our boy, now ready as Kyle, tells Leonhardt to move aside because he wants to go outside. Leonhardt refuses, stating that he cannot go out. Our boy becomes angry, reminding Leonhardt that he has not been outside in days and asking if he must remain locked up there forever. Leonhardt insists that he cannot leave until the master grants permission, asking if Kyle has forgotten what the master had said. Our boy tries to remember and recalls that his father, while calling him a delinquent, had confined him to his room due to the trouble he caused for the Marquis of Celterion. He realizes that time is running out. Mana particles swirl in the wind, and our boy states that since discovering he could open his mana channels, he has been absorbing the mana in the room every day. However, the amount of mana available is not sufficient to open the channels all at once. Like experience points in a game, the mana accumulated in his body, gradually improving his physical condition, but it is nowhere near enough to cure Hermimu. That is why he needs to go outside and gather more mana. Our boy decides that he needs to go outside to collect more mana. He smiles and tells Leonhardt that he is not going far, just for a short walk around to get some exercise. Leonhardt is shocked to hear about the exercise. He remarks that it is the first time he has ever heard such a constructive reason from our boy. In response, our boy becomes angry and asks what Leonhardt takes him for. Leonhardt explains that after being Kyle's bodyguard for years, this is the first time he has heard him say something like this. Our boy reflects on his reputation, which has been terrible for so long, and realizes that his trust level with Leonhardt is 0. He feels disheartened, thinking that he never expected Leonhardt to be such an impenetrable wall. Our boy concludes that Leonhardt is impossible to reason with. Currently, Leonhardt serves as Kyle's bodyguard, but he is originally a very famous character from the fantasy defense game, known for his excellent skills in both defense and offense, as well as his high potential. Leonhardt could be developed into a captain-level knight, serving as a tank in parties. He is also highly popular among players due to his loyalty trait, which ensures that he would never betray them. In the original game, after the downfall of the Marquis family, Leonhardt becomes a wandering knight who can be recruited by the player. However, since the Second Son's rebellion has not occurred yet, he is still at the Celterion mansion. Our boy thinks it is a waste for such a talented person to serve as a babysitter for a delinquent like him. He wonders what the Celterion Knight Order is even doing. With a sigh, he expresses aloud his frustration about Leonhardt's presence. Upon realizing that he spoke his thoughts out loud, Leonhardt asks if our boy has a problem with him being Kyle's bodyguard. Our boy checks Leonhardt's affection level, only to find it at -60, which disappoints him. He quickly tries to cover up his thoughts, insisting that it is not what Leonhardt is thinking and that he has no issue with him. Internally, our boy reflects that Leonhardt is simply too talented for this job. Leonhardt responds that he is merely following the master's orders. Our boy understands then that Leonhardt's loyalty lies not with him, but with Master Remtun Celterion. Our boy reflects that he expected this outcome, as who would want to be loyal to a delinquent like him? However, he realizes that he cannot let that situation stand. He tells Leonhardt that he needs to convince his father. Leonhardt becomes confused, sensing that something about Kyle feels different. Our boy smiles, thinking that once he catches Leonhardt's attention, he will be his. With a smile, he asks Leonhardt if he agrees with this plan, internally noting that his second project for recruiting talent is Leonhardt. Our boy smiles and asks Leonhardt if he will help him. Leonhardt looks at him, internally noting that Kyle's attitude seems different somehow, and asks Lord Kyle what he is scheming. Our boy becomes shocked, questioning what Leonhardt means by scheming, and asks if he does not trust him at all. He explains that he has been in his room for so long that his thoughts have changed. Leonhardt is taken aback and asks if his thoughts have truly changed. Our boy smirks, stating that he has decided to live a long life. Leonhardt becomes confused, wondering why someone like Lord Kyle, who had given up on everything due to the incurable Hermimu disease, would want to live longer. Leonhardt starts to reflect on the past when Kyle's father informed him that Kyle would not live past a certain age. Not only did he lack magical talent, but he was also deficient in swordsmanship skills. Additionally, being the youngest meant he had no chance of inheriting the family legacy. Despite all these obstacles, his father wanted to keep Kyle by his side. Remtun Celterion asks Leonhardt if he resents him for making such a decision. Leonhardt remains silent, stating that it is an honor beyond words for someone in the Celterion Knight Order to protect a direct descendant of the Marquis family. He bows and pledges to fulfill his duties faithfully. Remtun Celterion expresses his confidence in Leonhardt, remarking that he is a man of loyalty. He explains that this is why he wants Leonhardt to be at Kyle's side. Rempton further emphasizes that in the vast Marquis household, there is no one else he can truly trust to protect Kyle except Leonhardt. He instructs Leonhardt to take good care of him. Leonhardt looks down, bows in respect, and assures him that he will obey the Marquis. In the present, Leonhardt remains silent while observing Kyle. Kyle tells Leonhardt that if someone wants to live longer, they need to be healthy. Therefore, he intends to exercise outside. He suggests that he can inform his father about this, assuring Leonhardt that his father will understand. Kyle smiles and asks if it is acceptable for him to go outside. As he attempts to leave, Leonhardt blocks his path and reminds him that he can also exercise indoors. Our boy becomes annoyed, thinking that Leonhardt is truly stubborn and difficult to convince. He tells Leonhardt to move aside, insisting that he doesn't want to repeat himself. Frustrated, he internally resolves that he needs to go outside to find more mana cores. They both remain silent, staring at each other, and Leonhardt reflects on the unusual aura surrounding Lord Kyle, sensing something different about him. Nevertheless, Leonhardt asserts that the Marquis's orders are absolute, which applies to him as well. He adds that if Kyle really wants to go outside, he must get past him first. Our boy is shocked, sensing the killing intent emanating from Leonhardt. Realizing that the knight is using it against a child over something as simple as stepping outside. He thinks that if he were an ordinary 13-year-old, he might have wet himself in fear and collapsed on the spot. However, he is not an ordinary boy and firmly tells Leonhardt to uphold his word. Leonhardt agrees, and Kyle extends his hand, thinking that if he were just an ordinary 13-year-old, he would punch Leonhardt. A blue light emanates from his fist. Leonhardt gives Kyle a sidelong glance, and Kyle smirks as he passes by him. Kyle asks Leonhardt how it was, bragging that he managed to get past him. Once outside by the lake, he remarks on how refreshing the air feels. He lazily gulps in the fresh air and wonders how long it has been since he was last outside. Leonhardt is with him, observing quietly. Our boy reflects that even though it's just the garden near the annex, he feels a sense of freedom. He marvels at the beauty of the night sky and, more than anything, his eyes shine as he sees particles of mana everywhere. Excitedly, he thinks about devouring them all and starts running into the garden. Leonhardt stands there, confused, not expecting Kyle to be so elated just to be outside, thinking to himself that he's just a little kid. He remains silent but becomes slightly worried as he recalls the moment when Kyle passed him. He wonders how that was possible, considering that Lord Kyle has not trained in mana or aura and should not be able to handle this pressure. Our boy notices Leonhardt's confusion and thinks that it seems the knight is still rattled from what happened earlier, acknowledging that he had every reason to be shocked. Kyle was just a 13-year-old noble boy who had never been in a real fight, but mentally, he was a veteran who had survived countless virtual wars over the past 10 years in the virtual reality game Fantasy Defense. The game was famous for its realistic depictions of battle, and Kyle had become desensitized to life-or-death situations. So, when faced with a minor scare tactic like Leonard's killing intent, it felt almost second nature to him. After gathering enough mana particles, our boy thought he would be able to clear more mana channels soon. As he finished, Leonard approached him, stating that he would be receiving punishment from Rempton for his actions. Confused, our boy asked what he meant. Leonard explained that although he had followed Rempton's orders, it was wrong for him to direct killing intent toward the one he served. Therefore, he would seek punishment. Our boy assured him that it wasn't necessary, but if Leonard insisted on reporting to his father, he should also mention that Kyle didn't wish for him to be punished. True to his word, Leonhardt reported everything to Kyle's father, who was surprised by the request. Rempton asked if it was true that Kyle had requested his subordinate not be punished. Leonhardt confirmed this, stating that Kyle's words were sincere. Rempton clarified that it wasn't a matter of mistrusting Leonhardt, but rather that it was hard to believe. Leonhardt acknowledged this, admitting that even he had difficulty accepting it. He reported that when Kyle had calmly faced his killing intent, he had doubted what he was seeing. Rempton pondered, trying to understand how Kyle had resisted the killing intent of a knight as skilled as Leonhardt. He then asked what Kyle did afterward in the garden. After a moment of thought, Leonhardt recalled the cold wind and the sound of moving water as Kyle sat in the garden, focused. He responded to Rimpton that Kyle had meditated. Leonhardt slowly approached Kyle and asked if he knew how to meditate. Our boy responded that, when he was younger, his father had taught him some swordsmanship, and it was during that time that he also learned how to meditate. He then mentioned that he had quit shortly after realizing he had no talent for it. Our boy instructed Leonhardt to ensure no one disturbed him while he meditated, as it would disrupt his focus. Leonhardt acknowledged the request and later reported to Rimpton that Kyle had remained motionless in meditation for 6 hours straight. Rimpton, astonished, asked if Leonhardt had truly said 6 hours and not 6 seconds. Leonhardt confirmed, leaving Rimpton in disbelief. He recalled how, when Kyle was younger, he had tried to teach him swordsmanship. As a descendant of the family, it was expected that Kyle would also follow the path of a swordsman. Rimpton had hoped that Kyle would grow strong enough to overcome Heroman disease. However, Kyle could not handle the training, complaining that his legs felt tangled. This infuriated Rimpton, who scolded Kyle, telling him to get up. Rimpton reminded him that no weak descendant had ever come from their family. Certain that Kyle lacked both talent and determination, Rimpton had given up on the idea of him following the path of the sword. Yet now, the same Kyle had meditated for 6 hours, leaving Rimpton perplexed. He asked Leonhardt if Kyle had hit his head, or if it was even possible for someone to change so quickly. Leonhardt assured Rimpton that he had checked everything, including the food, and found nothing unusual. He admitted that Kyle had recently seemed different, not just in his determination, but even in the way he looked at him. It was clear that something had changed. Rimpton, mulling over this, decided that if Kyle was finally starting to mature, it wasn't a bad thing. He instructed Leonhardt to continue observing our boy, and Leonhardt agreed. Meanwhile, back in his room, our boy was gathering mana from the air around him. As the mana collected in his hand, he began channeling it into his body, enhancing his perception skills. His sharpened senses allowed him to assess the condition of his body accurately, feeling the mana coursing through him. He decided to attempt channeling mana all the way to his heart. The mana flowed through his arm, up his shoulder, crawled along his spine, and finally reached his heart. Our boy clenched his teeth in pain but felt a wave of relief when the system indicated that the path to his heart had been cleared. The blocked channel trait was weakening for the first time. He could now feel mana flowing through his entire body. Overjoyed, our boy realized he had successfully gathered external mana and cleared the channels leading to his heart. This meant he could now use magic. Determined, he clenched his fist and resolved to begin serious magic training. In that world, using magic required forming a mana circle near the heart. The higher the level of magic one wished to use, the more circles needed to be formed. Creating multiple circles took time, which is why those aspiring to be mages typically began their training early, usually between the ages of 5 and 8. By age 12, they should have formed their first circle to be considered suitable for the path of a mage by societal standards. Kyle, at 13, was a bit late to start learning magic. However, that was when he had been an ordinary NPC. Now, staring at his status window, our boy knew his situation was different. With the mana pathways talent and his mana channels cleared to the heart, he was finally in a state to learn magic. All he needed to do now was form his first mana circle. He pondered how to create it, wondering if he should attempt the method he had learned in the game. Suddenly, there was a knock. It is Leon who informs Kyle that his father has lifted the restrictions. Kyle is delighted to hear this. Leon further explains that the restriction is lifted on the condition that he accompanies Kyle. This allows Kyle to leave his room and walk around the garden, but Leon clarifies that he still cannot leave the mansion. Kyle happily responds that this is fine, thinking to himself that being allowed in the garden is a good enough start. He also believes that Leonhardt must have spoken favorably to the Marquis on his behalf. As expected, Kyle knew it was a wise decision to win Leon over first. However, he wonders how his favorability score improved by 30 points. Considering it was -50 in likability when Leon first dismissed his hostility. Could Leon have been moved by watching him meditate all night? Remembering how exhausted he was after meditating for 6 hours, he wondered if Leonhardt was the type to be inspired by sweat and effort, much like in sports. With an idea in mind, he told Leonhardt it was perfect timing because there was somewhere they needed to go together. When Leonhardt asked where they were going, our boy simply replied that he would find out if he followed. They arrived at the library, and the librarian was horrified to see him. He greeted her, but she immediately questioned how he had gotten there and rushed to Leonhardt for an explanation. She reminded him that Kyle was forbidden from entering the library. Leonhardt informed her that Rimpton had lifted the restriction, which shocked the librarian even more. Tearfully, she recalled how Kyle had previously thrown books on the floor and torn them to pieces. She had begged him not to destroy the rare books she had obtained after traveling all over the empire, but he had dismissed her pleas, stating that they were just papers she wouldn't be able to read once she was dead. He then proceeded to tear them up and throw them away, leaving her in tears. She reminded Leonhardt that, after that incident, Kyle had been banned from the library again. Clearing his throat to get their attention, our boy told the librarian that he had come to read books and asked if there were any related to magic. They both looked at him in confusion. She replied that, while the collection was limited, they did have some introductory level books for beginners, as the Duke's family had always emphasized swordsmanship over magic. He said that would be sufficient and requested a book explaining how to form mana circles. A moment later, he began reading about mana as the force that created everything, a form of supernatural urgal energy. The text also mentioned that supernatural urgal energy was a term defined by the scholar Joshua Allengrang, associated with his birth story. Frustrated, our boy questioned whether this was truly an introductory book and why it was so complicated. Exhausted, he laid down, doubting that 7-year-olds could understand such material and thinking it resembled a university thesis. He wondered if he had to read all of it, reminiscing about how, in a game, a status window would appear and the knowledge would be automatically learned. Just then, the status window appeared, showing that his insight skill had been activated. Surprised, he watched as his insight skill began translating the low-level book's text. Once the entire book was translated, a loading process appeared. When it reached 100%, the translation of Introductory Book 1 was complete. Amazed, our boy realized that the insight skill could also function as a translator. After glancing at the books next to him, our boy decided there was no need to linger in the library any longer. He called out to the librarian, Alice, and instructed her to bring him more introductory books on circle formation, informing her that he would be borrowing all of them. Back in his room, Leonhardt placed the books on the table and reported that this was the last batch of all the books our boy had requested. Pleased, our boy complimented Leonhardt on carrying them so efficiently. Excitedly, he eagerly scanned the books, prompting Leonhardt to ask if he was sure about borrowing so many at once. Confused, our boy asked Leonhardt what he meant. Leonhardt explained that the librarian, Alice, had been very concerned. She had begged him to ensure the safe return of the borrowed books, as they were rare volumes, irreplaceable even if she sold her entire estate. Our boy reassured Leonhardt not to worry, confidently stating that he would finish reading the books in no time. He jokingly asked if they were concerned he might burn them. Leonhardt, remembering how Kyle used to despise reading, wondered aloud about his sudden interest. His curiosity deepened as he noticed the books were about mana usage and the basics of circle formation. Surprised, Leonhardt reminded our boy that Herm-Immu's disease blocked the body's channels, preventing mana and aura from flowing through it. Before Leonhardt could finish, our boy cut him off, saying that learning magic would indeed be difficult for him and asking if that was what Leonhardt had intended to say. Leonhardt apologized for overstepping, but our boy assured him that he was correct. He acknowledged that everyone in the household likely thought the same and that what he was doing must seem strange to them. This caught Leonhardt off guard. Our boy then clarified that, as the infamous disowned youngest son, no one would be surprised if he acted oddly once or twice more. He added that reading wouldn't harm anyone, and he understood why Leonhardt was concerned, worried that another failure might send Kyle into deeper despair. However, our boy reminded him that, as he had said before, he didn't intend to die young. With a light punch on Leonhardt's shoulder, our boy swore he would do everything in his power to succeed. He then headed to his bed, announcing it was time to lie down and read some more, leaving Leonhardt in stunned surprise. Leonhardt watched as our boy lay down, picked up a book, and smiled happily. This triggered a memory of Kyle Saltirian, a boy Leonhardt had once known, crying in the training hall and calling out for his father. Leonhardt had approached him, concerned, and asked why he was crying. Tearfully, our boy had replied that his father had told him he didn't need someone like him. Leonhardt had tried to console him, worried about his fragile state. As Leonhardt picked up one of the books, he reflected on how Kyle, once a tearful child, was now slowly changing. He then glanced at his status window and was shocked to see Kyle's favorability score toward him had increased to 0, no longer the -30 it had been moments ago. Puzzled, Leonhardt wondered what had caused such a sudden jump of 30 points in Kyle's favorability. He placed the book on the bed and told Kyle that he would be waiting outside if he needed anything. Caught off guard, Kyle stuttered a reply of acknowledgement. Smiling, Leonhardt left the room, leaving Kyle to wonder if his reading had caused the shift in favorability. He questioned why there had been no change in the library and speculated whether Leonhardt had a fondness for persistence. Kyle considered that devouring so many books at once might have been seen as persistence in Leonhardt's eyes. With a quiet laugh, he concluded that Leonhardt was indeed a strange guy, while Leonhardt, outside the room, walked away smiling. Our boy felt a wave of relief. Finally, he was alone, surrounded by books. He sat down and decided it was time to truly dive into his studies. Activating his insight skill, he began decoding the text in the books. To his amazement, the book started translating and processing at an incredible speed. He noticed that insight worked dozens of times faster than normal reading, even with the most difficult parts of the text being stored as easily understandable data. The system then notified him that the principles of circle formation had been digitized and saved. His understanding had increased, and all the books in his vicinity had been fully decoded. Excited and pleased with the ease of the process, our boy clicked on the principles of circle formation to move to the next step. As he began forming a circle using the decoded data, the system confirmed that he had understood the principles of circle formation and met the minimum requirements to create his first circle. Staring at the golden circle in front of him, our boy knew that by directing mana along the golden path, he could form the circle by pushing the golden path toward his heart. He commanded it to move inside him. The force of the golden path entering his body caused the book data around him to fly, and the system indicated that the mana was following the path within him. He felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if his heart were burning, yet he knew he had to endure. Otherwise, the mana would backfire and damage his organs. The magic circle began to form in his heart as he pushed through the pain, constantly telling himself to hold on for just a little longer. When the golden path finally began to disappear, leaving behind a completed magic circle, with the golden path vanished, a perfect magic circle formed inside his heart. The pain subsided, and our boy opened his eyes, wondering if he had succeeded. The system confirmed that he had formed his first circle, weakening his blocked channels and intensifying his mana pathways. He could now store refined mana within the circle. Overjoyed, our boy stood up, shouting in triumph that he had done it. However, his celebration was cut short as a wave of dizziness hit him. He noticed the bright light outside his window, realizing that it was already morning. Just before losing consciousness, our boy thought to himself that Leonhardt and Urgel were going to scold him for this, and then he collapsed to the floor. A short while later, Urgel entered the room, bringing his breakfast, and gasped in shock when she saw him lying on the ground, surrounded by books. She rushed to him in worry, shouting to ask why he was on the floor and what was with all the books in just one night. Our boy had successfully used all the mana he had accumulated to form his first circle. A new chapter in his life as Kyle Salterian, the official mage, had begun. Later that day, Alice was horrified when she saw the mess the books were in as Leonhardt returned them. However, Leonhardt comforted her, saying that at least none of the books were damaged. Days later, in the kitchen, Urgel carefully prepared our boy's meal as she placed the garnish on top, smiling as she remembered his reaction to the last meal she brought him and how he had praised it as incredibly delicious, just as she had expected. Grabbing the tray, she turned to deliver the food to our boy. However, a group of maids blocked her path, asking if the food was meant for Kyle. She confirmed that it was. The green-haired maid stepped forward and told Urgel that they would deliver it for her, so she could rest. Urgel became confused and asked what she was suddenly talking about. The green-haired maid reminded her that serving Kyle was Sally's responsibility and that Urgel was just a temporary replacement. Sally chimed in, mentioning that Kyle's personality had improved recently, and they were suggesting a return to the original arrangement. Urgel stared at them for a moment before replying that she didn't want to end things. If they had complaints about their work or wanted to change it, they should take it up with our boy directly. Furiously, the green-haired maid shouted at Urgel, ordering her to stop. But Urgel kept walking. Before she could leave the kitchen, another maid entered, staring at her. The tension grew as the green-haired maid continued shouting, asking if Urgel thought she was special. Urgel ignored them and left. Upon arriving at Kyle's room, she smiled as she watched him enjoy the meal she had prepared. She asked if the food suited his taste and mentioned that she had adapted the recipe he had taught her last time. Our boy complimented her cooking, telling her that her skills improved day by day. Shyly, Urgel admitted that she had been practicing hard every day and had even learned a few new recipes from the head chef. Our boy praised her diligence and hard work. After finishing his meal, he put down his utensils and asked about her progress with spirit magic, making her visibly worried. He ordered her to bring the introductory book on spirit magic he had given her, which she quickly fetched. Opening the book, he asked how far she had read, and she replied that she was about halfway through. When our boy examined the book, he was surprised to see the worn pages and detailed notes. Realizing that Urgel had been studying diligently, he understood that, coming from a noble family, she had a solid basic education, so her learning speed wasn't slow. He also considered that, given her age, she was quite talented, and it would be ideal to build her skills gradually over time. However, our boy sighed and told her that at her current pace, it wouldn't be enough, which left her surprised. He knew they didn't have the luxury of time. In 2 months, the Seltian family would hold the heir succession ceremony, and on that day, the coup led by the second son, Adele, would take place. The Marquis family would fall, and Urgel, caught in the chaos, would lose her life. Our boy understood that she had to become stronger before then. He told Urgel that, for now, she should leave the cooking to someone else and focus solely on her studies. He explained that this would help her concentrate better, and he would have Sally take over serving him again, so she shouldn't worry. To his surprise, Urgel clenched her fists and shouted, "No!" in disagreement. Startled, our boy called her name in confusion. Stuttering, she swore that she would work hard, continue studying spirit magic, and keep cooking without neglecting either. Tearfully, she begged him not to let someone else serve him, pleading to keep her duties. Her sincere gaze, filled with tears, left our boy stunned. In that moment, he understood something deeper. Urgel had lost everything when her family collapsed. She had gone from being the daughter of a baronet to a slave and now a maid. She had lost contact with her family and didn't even know if they were alive. It was only natural that Urgel felt insecure. Just as she had started adjusting to life as a maid and finding some stability, he had suddenly pushed her to prioritize studying spirit magic. Of course, she would be confused. Being a maid had given her a sense of purpose and security, which was why it had taken precedence over her magic studies. Our boy realized that Urgel must have feared that if she couldn't perform her duties as a maid properly, she might be kicked out of the mansion. He understood that it was his fault for not explaining the situation clearly. He gently asked her if she remembered what he had said when he brought her to the mansion. He reassured her that he never abandoned his people and always protected them, which made her stop crying in surprise. Our boy softly told her that he didn't ask her to learn spirit magic without reason. She was an excellent maid. Her cooking skills were outstanding, and she was diligent and meticulous. If she continued to work hard, she could be promoted to head maid. However, he reminded her that there were plenty of other maids in the mansion, meaning many could replace her in that role. In a panic, Urgel called out to him, but our boy calmly asked her to consider what would happen if she became a spirit mage. He explained how rare and respected skilled spirit mages were. He told her that she would become a great person, the greatest spirit mage, and that everyone would look up to her. She would stand tall above everyone else, and no one in the world would be able to replace her. Our boy then asked how that sounded, remarking that it was amazing. But Urgel still hesitated. Worried, she asked if she could really do it. Our boy confidently reassured her, telling her that she absolutely could. Handing the book back to her, he reiterated that she could become the greatest spirit mage and that he believed in her. Urgel, happy and encouraged, accepted the book, replying that she would work hard because she trusted him. And the system notified Kyle that her affection for him had increased by 60. Surprised by her response, he gladly encouraged her, feeling content with her trust. Afterward, our boy officially appointed Urgel as his personal maid, entrusting her with most of his personal affairs to ensure she could study and work in peace. He moved her out of the shared maid quarters and gave her a private room. When he showed her the room, she was amazed. He knew it was not only better for her studies, but also beneficial for his security. Additionally, this way, she wouldn't have to worry about clashing with the other maids. Urgel expressed how much she loved the room, especially because it was so close to his, which left Kyle stunned for a moment. He asked if that was what she liked most about it, thinking she might be quite attached to it, to which she happily agreed. Kyle then sincerely told her that they should work hard together and survive, no matter what. Later, while Urgel was in the library, she noticed someone walking outside. She looked out of the window and saw Kyle walking with Leonhardt. Kyle waved at her, and although she was surprised for a moment, she smiled warmly at him. The system indicated that her affection for him had increased by 65. Meanwhile, at the main mansion, a maid approached the second lord, Adolf Celterion, asking for a moment of his time to deliver a report. After hearing what she had to say, Adolf became interested. He asked if she was saying that Kyle had changed, to which the maid confirmed. She further reported that Kyle had recently been exercising and building his strength, as well as dedicating significant time to studying magic. Kyle's personality had also improved. He no longer lashed out or hit the servants in anger. Astonished that his foolish younger brother seemed to have matured, Adolf remarked that as the second brother, he supposed it was time to pay Kyle a visit. After waving back to Urgel, Kyle continued walking with Leonhardt. He ordered Leonhardt to take him to a large open space somewhere out of sight. Curious, Leonhardt asked what he was planning, to which Kyle replied that he wanted to conduct a magic experiment. This surprised Leonhardt, who confusedly asked what he meant by a magic experiment. A short while later, they arrived at the outermost part of the estate. Leonhardt informed him that the area was secluded, surrounded by dense trees, and not visible from the mansion. Kyle responded that it was perfect and instructed Leonhardt to ensure no one came near. Leonhardt acknowledged the order, leaning against a nearby tree and silently observing. He couldn't help but think that, due to Herm's disease, Kyle shouldn't be able to master swordsmanship or magic. A few days of reading magic books shouldn't have changed that, but with the current Kyle, Leonhardt felt it just might be possible. Our boy gathered magical power in his hand and released it in the form of a magic missile. The missile shot toward a tree, piercing straight through it. Both Kyle and Leonhardt were shocked as the tree cracked in half and collapsed with a loud crash. Kyle, stunned by the noise, quickly asked Leonhardt if the sound could have been heard inside the mansion. Leonhardt reassured him, explaining that he had used his aura to suppress the explosion, ensuring that the sound of the tree falling wouldn't have been heard either. Our boy sighed in relief and complimented Leonhardt on his quick reflexes. However, Leonhardt, still in shock, asked when our boy had formed a circle. Kyle replied that it hadn't been long and that he had simply followed the instructions from the book he borrowed from the library, and it worked. Leonhardt, even more surprised, asked if that meant Kyle was now cured. Kyle confidently confirmed that he had overcome Herm's disease, releasing his magic in his palm as he spoke. Leonhardt stared at Kyle, recalling his earlier words about not planning to die young and doing everything he could to survive. It all made sense now. Smiling, Leonhardt congratulated him on surpassing his disease. The system then notified Kyle that Leonhardt's favorability toward him had increased by 10, making him realize that Leonhardt was truly a man of perseverance. Leonhardt explained that Magic Missile was typically a first circle spell, usually possessing the strength of a punch from an adult male. However, the power Kyle had displayed was far beyond that of a typical first circle spell, as evidenced by the destroyed tree. Kyle agreed. adding that the power he felt was more akin to a fourth circle spell, even though he was still technically a first circle mage. He assured Leonhardt that despite his current rank, he had just unleashed a fourth circle level of power with a first circle spell. Leonhardt marveled at how incredible that was. Kyle admitted that even he hadn't expected such strength. Leaving Leonhardt to wonder if he was some kind of prodigy, Kyle remarked that regardless of how they looked at it, such power was too conspicuous. Grateful for his insight and talent, he reflected on how he had managed to read all the first circle magic books in the library thanks to it. Without this insight, it would have taken him months just to form a circle. However, one question lingered in his mind. Why was the magic usage decoded by insight different from that in the game? He remembered that, according to the magic books, casting spells involved drawing a complex magic circle, followed by intricate calculations and equations, before circulating mana to activate the spell, a very old-school method. In contrast, in the game, magic casting was much simpler. Players only needed to draw a basic magic symbol with mana, and the spell would activate immediately. This method was easier, faster, and more powerful. Kyle decided to try using magic in a more user-friendly way, similar to the game. However, the power he unleashed was overwhelming. He knew this was a problem, as it wasn't the right time to reveal his full strength yet. Kyle asked Leonhardt if he could keep what he had just revealed a secret. Taken aback, Leonhardt inquired if he meant keeping it from his father as well. With a soft smile, Kyle replied in the affirmative and playfully suggested they keep it between themselves. To his shock, the system immediately indicated that Leonhardt's favorability had decreased. Kyle couldn't believe he was losing favor just for that and wondered if his tone had been that off-putting. He explained that there was a reason for his secrecy. He didn't want anyone to know how strong he was just yet. Leonhardt, still puzzled, asked why. Kyle revealed that it was due to the upcoming succession ceremony in 2 months. This revelation startled Leonhardt. Kyle then asked if he was aware of the event. The succession ceremony of the Marquis of Sutyan family was a traditional competition to determine the heir, based not on age, but on merit. The family judged candidates based on personality, swordsmanship, wisdom, knowledge, public support, and the opinions of loyal followers. The goal was to select the most promising heir capable of leading the family to greater prosperity. Currently, 2 individuals were fiercely competing for the position of heir. The eldest son, Abel Celterion, and the second son, Adolf Celterion. Abel, the eldest son of the Marquis' legitimate wife, was the most likely candidate, known for his gentle nature and exceptional swordsmanship skills. He had been groomed to be the heir since childhood, growing up under high expectations as a model elite, primarily supported by the family's long-serving retainers. On the other hand, Adolf, also born of a legitimate wife, had long been overshadowed by his elder brother and overlooked for many years. However, as he matured, Adolf's personality became more composed, and his swordsmanship skills improved rapidly, allowing him to stand out. His supporters were primarily young, passionate knights. The scene shifts to the main palace, where Adolf and Abel meet with their supporters. Adolf asks Abel if he's been ignoring his younger brother. Abel, smiling, replies that it has been a while. He further explains that he was so lost in thought, he didn't even notice Adolf approaching. Frustrated, Adolf tells Abel to stop joking, as it's hard to believe that Abel, who manifested an aura at the age of 5, couldn't sense someone's presence. Abel responds, saying that was a story from ages ago and wasn't a big deal. It had been a childhood fluke, nothing worth bragging about. He then tells Adolf that he is embarrassed, and Adolf shouldn't bring it up again, or people will laugh at him since it's not worth mentioning. Abel notes that Adolf was the one who first manifested an aura at the age of 15. One of Abel's subordinates then remarks that his son had a similar experience, and he had worried that his son was slow and lacked talent. Abel reassures him, saying that some people start slowly, but now that his son has taken that difficult first step, he will grow quickly, Abel added. Angered by this, one of Adolf's subordinates told Abel's men to stop talking nonsense. However, Adolf, with a serious gaze, intervened and told his subordinate to stop. He reminded them that they were in the main house, where their father resided, and that they shouldn't act recklessly. His subordinates quickly apologized to Adolf. Observing this, Abel commented that Adolf had trained his subordinates well, further stating that Adolf was truly worthy of being a candidate for the heir of the Marquis of Celterion. Hearing this, Adolf responded, "Laugh all you want," and as he stepped closer to Abel added, "You won't be laughing for much longer." As Adolf left with his men, Abel couldn't help but dwell on what Adolf had just said. Kyle, while having lunch with Leonhardt, informs him that the succession ceremony is only 2 months away. He explains that the Celterion Marquis doesn't follow the principle of primogeniture, which means that only the firstborn have the right to inherit the estate or title. That's why legitimacy or illegitimacy doesn't matter at all. The sole criterion for selection is strength. Anyone who is a direct descendant of the father is eligible for succession, except for Kyle. Due to his illness, he was removed from the succession race early on. Kyle's third older brother, Duke, is also not involved in the succession struggle. While being 15 isn't a problem, Kyle's swordsmanship and magic are still inferior compared to his much older brothers. Leonhardt then discusses the current situation, and Kyle confirms that his eldest brother Abel and his second eldest brother Adolf are the only two individuals competing for succession. It is a duel between the two of them. Both Abel and Adolf would not welcome any unexpected developments because there is very little time left until the ceremony. This raises an important question. What would happen if it became known that Kyle possesses great power in such a situation? There are only two possibilities regarding what Kyle's elder brothers would do if they found out that someone who was never considered a threat suddenly emerged as a dark horse. They might try to bring Kyle to their side, or they might try to crush him while he is still young. Both Leonhardt and Urgel grow nervous after hearing that. Leonhardt comments that it's a rather extreme way of thinking, but admits that throughout history, there have been instances like this before over succession. Hearing that, Kyle replies that it is exactly what he means. Kyle thinks that according to the game's setting, Abel is basically good, so he'll be fine, but Adolf, on the other hand, would definitely try to kill him. From the very beginning, Adolf has been planning to eliminate the entire family. Kyle then tells Leonhardt that his current position is one of potential. Having just overcome Hermimu, he's promising for the future, but still has limited skills. For the youngest first-class wizard, this level of ability is ideal. Kyle then strikes a playful pose, saying that while it would be good to bring Adolf to their side, even if they don't, the damage won't be too severe. Reinhardt closes his eyes and nods, confirming that he understands. After that, he stands up, saying that wizards often conceal their abilities to protect themselves, and he has also heard that they sometimes pretend to downplay their circle level. In that context, it makes sense to him, but after the succession ceremony, he decides he will report Kyle's abilities to the head of the family. Hearing Leonhardt's decision, Kyle wonders if it's due to his low favorability rating. The current Leonhardt pledges loyalty to the head of the family, Kyle's father, but not to Kyle himself. That's why it's difficult to expect Leonhardt to unconditionally support him. Still, since Leonhardt doesn't outright refuse, it's a better situation than before. Even so, Kyle is sure that he will eventually make Leonhardt follow him. After that, Kyle smiles mischievously, thinking that he will definitely win Leonhardt over. While leaving, Leonhardt suddenly feels a chill and looks back at Kyle, asking if he's serious about becoming a wizard. Kyle confirms that he will, explaining that since the current Marquis is known for its swordsmanship, having a skilled wizard among them wouldn't be a bad thing either. Leonhardt smiles at that and comments that it's a good idea, adding that the head of the family will be happy too. Kyle is surprised to see that Leonhardt's favorability suddenly increases, reaching a positive 30. Kyle wonders which part of their conversation caused such a jump. Before leaving, Leonhardt stops to compliment Urgel on her cooking, saying that the steak was very delicious. Urgel humbly thanks him for the compliment. Seeing that, Kyle thinks that eating together increases favorability, so he decides not to let the opportunity slip away. He tells Leonhardt to eat with him in his room from now on. Leonhardt looks puzzled, wondering why Kyle is suddenly acting like that, and tells him that he can eat at the knight's dormitory instead. But Kyle stops him, claiming that it's an order. A brief silence falls before Leonhardt finally accepts the order. Night falls, and Kyle is studying magic circles in his room. He creates 2 different types of magic circles, then grabs one of them, saying that if it activates magic using the method used in the game, the activation speed is fast, and the power is tremendous. However, The only drawback is that it's difficult to control the power. Kyle doesn't understand why the game method makes magic stronger, but handling it this way is difficult for him. He closes his eyes to think of a solution but can't come up with one, so he decides to seal it for now. Kyle knows there will be many times in the future when he'll need to demonstrate his magic, but he also realizes he can't rely solely on standard methods. The magic activation method in this world is slower, and the drawback is that it's hard to master. However, it allows much finer control over power. Then suddenly, Kyle gets an idea. He remembers the magic activation method of this world and decides to take only the advantages of the game user's method, coming to the conclusion that he should combine the two. Just as he thinks that, a warning window appears, informing him of the danger. It claims that a magic explosion could occur and asks if he wants to continue. Kyle becomes startled and a bit nervous after seeing that. But when he reads the message carefully, he understands that it's not saying the process is impossible, only that it carries risk. Since this is a warning window, not an error, Kyle realizes there's definitely danger involved. But he also knows that high risks come with high rewards. Nothing can be gained without taking risks. Determined, Kyle agrees to continue combining the circles. Suddenly, a bluish light begins to overflow as more warning windows appear one after another, again asking if he wants to proceed. Kyle smiles confidently, saying, "Of course," and executes the combination. The system begins analyzing the activation method, recognizing that Kyle's understanding of magic missile is very high. It then searches for the most efficient path to merge the two systems. The process completes, and Kyle watches in awe as the two magic activation methods fuse into one. He finally succeeds and creates a new spell, Combined Activation Method, Magic Missile. Kyle finds it amazing, and, now that the foundation is laid, he decides to refine it further. He adds a bit more magic, but then reduces it slightly after seeing another warning window appear, reminding him that a magic explosion could occur. Kyle tries lowering the output, but the result doesn't turn out as expected. Meanwhile, Urgel, who is carrying a bedsheet, suddenly hears a loud sound coming from Kyle's room and rushes there immediately. Kyle quickly assures her that he's fine and laughs nervously when he notices the hole in the wall, saying he was just practicing magic. Urgel hurries over to check if he's truly all right, and then notices the damage. Kyle laughs again, admitting he probably should have done the experiment outside. The warning window did say there might be an explosion, but now Kyle fully understands what it meant. He decides he needs to set up a proper magic workshop with barriers next time to prevent this kind of accident. A moment later, Leonhard also rushes in after hearing the loud noise and immediately notices the hole in the wall. Kyle asks him for help cleaning up the mess, and Leonhard agrees. Kyle sighs and thinks that they should clean everything up first and figure things out later, while also realizing that the librarian is going to be furious since several books were ruined in the process. The scene then shifts to the kitchen, where Urgel is cooking food for Kyle. When she tastes it, she notices that something feels a bit off. She worries about how Kyle will react after realizing the flavor is somewhat plain and becomes anxious, wondering what she should do. Another maid approaches Urgel, trying to start a conversation, and says that she can see Urgel is preparing a meal for Kyle. She compliments Urgel, saying that she is very diligent every day. Urgel startles at her sudden approach, looks at Daisy, then turns back to continue cooking, replying that it's her job. Daisy grows nervous, thinking that Urgel is very cautious, and offers some advice. She suggests that if the stew's seasoning feels off, Urgel should try adding a dash of nutmeg. Urgel listens curiously, and Daisy continues, explaining that it's an ingredient that brings out a rich umami flavor. She encourages Urgel to trust her and give it a try. Since Urgel wants Kyle to enjoy his meal, she follows Daisy's suggestion and adds a little bit of the seasoning. After mixing it in, Urgel tastes the food again and finds it very delicious. Daisy agrees and smiles. After a brief pause, Urgel asks Daisy if she's good at cooking and whether she could teach her a bit more about it. Hearing that, Daisy smirks slightly but quickly changes her expression to a pleasant smile. Leaning closer, she agrees to help Urgel if she can. For now, Daisy decides to help her carry the food since it's ready. Urgel thanks her for that, and they begin taking the dishes to Kyle's room. While walking, Daisy asks about Kyle's behavior lately, saying she's heard that Kyle has changed a lot and become more polite. Hearing that, Urgel looks at her, and Daisy continues, saying she was actually quite worried about Urgel when she became Kyle's exclusive maid. Daisy admits she was afraid Kyle might trouble or mistreat her. Without going into detail, Urgel replies that everything is fine and confirms that Kyle treats her well. Hearing that, Daisy smiles and says she's glad. She also mentions that she's heard Kyle has become much more disciplined recently, getting up early, exercising, and even studying diligently. Hearing that, Urgel blushes slightly and confirms that Kyle is indeed very hard-working and studies hard every day. They arrive at Kyle's room, and Daisy decides to take her leave. Urgel enters and tells Kyle what Daisy asked about him. Urgel explains that Daisy wanted to know what Kyle has been doing lately and who he's been meeting. Kyle asks Urgel what she told her. Urgel confirms that she said she didn't know anything. She thinks to herself that she shouldn't reveal any details about Kyle, then asks if she responded correctly. Kyle smiles, gives her a thumbs up, and tells her she did a great job. It was the right decision. However, he adds that in the future, she can answer moderately because he won't be able to hide the fact that he overcame Hermimu and is secretly learning magic. Urgel nods and says she'll keep that in mind. Sitting on his chair, Kyle thinks to himself that he expected the impatient one to act first, but it seems the tale is already showing. This leaves Kyle no choice but to compliment his brother for his lack of patience. It's so obvious that Abel is rushing things. Later that night, Leonhardt reports the news about Kyle overcoming Hermimu to Kyle's father, who is so shocked that he stands up from his chair, asking Leonhardt if it's really true. He is the Marquis of the Celterian family, Rimpton Celterian. Leonhardt confirms that it's true and says Kyle is currently studying magic on his own. He adds that Kyle has already achieved the first circle, and though he believes Kyle's power exceeds that level, he'll explain the details later. Kyle's father exhales deeply, realizing that Kyle truly overcame Hermimu. He recalls the last time he saw Kyle. His condition was terrible back then. That was why he was so angry and harsh with him. He remembers that Kyle had shouted at him in frustration, saying he never asked to be born with such a body and that his father should have ended his suffering early. Kyle had been trembling and furious, overwhelmed by despair, which made his father clench his fist in frustration and order Kyle to stay confined to his room and not cause trouble, declaring that he would pretend he didn't have a son like him. Now, remembering those words again, Kyle's father regrets saying them. He asks Leonhardt about Kyle's age now. Leonhardt answers that Kyle recently turned 13. Kyle's father remarks that to overcome Hermimu, one needs exceptional talent in either magic or swordsmanship, and that such talent usually manifests at around 5 or 6 years old. He then asks if there have ever been any cases of someone overcoming Hermimu as late as 13. Leonhardt replies that he isn't sure about that either, but he can confirm that Kyle truly overcame it because he personally saw him using first circle magic. Hearing that, Kyle's father wonders aloud if it's truly a miracle. He then decides to take Leonhardt's advice and asks whether Leonhardt thinks he should meet Kyle. Leonhardt counters by asking if he doesn't want to see Kyle. Kyle's father admits that he's uncertain because he believes Kyle probably still resents him. Hearing that, Leonhardt corrects him, saying that Kyle mentioned he has something important he wants to talk about with his father. The scene then shifts to Leonhardt and Kyle's meeting, where the two are having a conversation. Leonhardt tells Kyle that if he has something to say, he can convey it to the Marquis on his behalf, but Kyle replies that there's no need. He wants to meet his father in person and speak directly to him. Leonhardt explains that as Kyle knows, he is currently under house arrest, so without the Marquis' permission, he can't leave the annex. Kyle jumps down to the ground and says he already knows that, which is why he's asking Leonhardt to tell his father that he sincerely wishes to see him. Leonhardt feels a chill and looks at Kyle, who seems calm yet determined, like a child earnestly pleading with him, leaving Leonhardt no choice but to accept. Seeing that, Leonhardt becomes convinced that Kyle no longer harbors resentment toward the Marquis. Kyle's father bangs on the table again, asking Leonhardt what exactly Kyle said about him. Leonhardt clears his throat and tells him that Kyle wishes to meet the Marquis personally. Kyle, looking at the picture of his father, explains that Rimpton, who is also the head of the prestigious swordsmanship family, the Celterian Marquis, has protected the family from monsters for generations. He is one of the 5 sword masters on the continent, and also the father of Kyle Celterian. Seeing the portrait, Kyle's body suddenly begins trembling uncontrollably. He realizes that his body still remembers the fear and resentment toward his father. Past memories begin replaying in his mind. His father pointing a wooden sword at him and shouting if Kyle couldn't even lift a sword, and yet dared to call himself the son of a renowned swordsmanship family. At that time, Kyle trembled and stuttered, telling his father that he couldn't do it because it was too difficult. His father shouted again, claiming that as the child of Marquis Saltarian, being that weak made him useless to the family. Shocked and devastated, Kyle began crying, wondering if he was truly a useless child simply because he couldn't wield a sword, even though he would soon die from illness. In tears, Kyle had begged his father not to abandon him. Remembering those moments, Kyle mutters that it was quite a heavy blow. The recent memories come from the current owner of this body, Kyle, but they now also belong to the new Kyle. Since the souls of Lee Hyun-woo and Kyle have merged through possession, the emotional pressure Kyle felt is fully transmitted. However, this new Kyle is no longer the coward he once was. Now, Kyle is both Kyle and Lee Hyun-woo. He clenches his fist and vows that, as an adult speaking to another adult, he will prove his worth. The scene then shifts to Remtun, who is working in his office. Kyle enters the room and stands before his father. Remtun looks up and asks Kyle if he has something to say. Kyle confirms that he wants to talk with the Marquis. Hearing this, Remtun grows silent, noting that Kyle is addressing him as Marquis instead of father. He wonders what Kyle's intentions are. Remtun taps his finger on the table and reminds Kyle that he clearly instructed him not to leave his room without permission. Then he sternly warns Kyle that although he has allowed him limited access to the library for study, he should not cause any more trouble. He adds that this time, if Kyle disobeys, it won't end with simple confinement, and asks if Kyle understands what that means. Kyle's body trembles just from standing before him. He knows there is no trust between them, but it can't be helped, since the previous Kyle caused so much trouble. Moreover, his father is a sword master, one of the 5 strongest on the continent. Kyle tries to view his father's status window, but even the system fails to show any details because his father's rank is too high. The system cannot confirm information about such a powerful opponent. Kyle also wants to gauge his favorability using the insight skill, but even that proves difficult right now. With no other choice, Kyle decides to negotiate directly. He replies to the Marquis that he understands, and that's why he formally requested an interview through Leonhardt. Remtun is shocked by Kyle's composed response, since in the past, Kyle would have argued back. The Marquis remarks that perhaps the saying about growing up is true. Kyle calmly agrees, saying that he has indeed grown up. He continues, admitting that he has caused a lot of trouble and annoyance to the Marquis due to his childish behavior, and acknowledges that it was entirely his own fault. Then Kyle bows his head respectfully, apologizing for his past actions and promising that he will change from now on. Remtun is astonished to see Kyle apologizing, the same child who once blamed others and grew irritated at everything. But Kyle adds one more thing. He wishes to make a deal with the Marquis. Kyle explains that he knows Remtun has already heard about him overcoming Hermamo. Remtun confirms that he has, but admits that he still finds it difficult to believe such a miraculous thing could actually happen. Kyle nods and demonstrates his magic, revealing that he is now a first circle mage. Seeing this, Remtun realizes that even though he was skeptical after hearing Leonhardt's report, the truth is undeniable. He can now sense the flow of mana coming from Kyle himself. He acknowledges that Kyle will only continue to grow stronger. Mages who have overcome Hermamo are known to possess exceptional potential. Perhaps because of that, Kyle managed to achieve the first circle through self-study in only a few days. The value of a great mage is said to be equal to that of an entire knight order. Kyle then tells the Marquis that while the Saltarian family is known for its swordsmanship, having a talented mage among their direct bloodline would be even more prestigious. If the family supports Kyle in developing as a mage, he promises to contribute his magical abilities to the household. In doing so, he would become a great asset, allowing the Saltarian Marquis, which masters both swordsmanship and magic, to stand above all other noble families in the kingdom. After explaining everything, Kyle asks what the Marquis thinks about this mutually beneficial deal and respectfully requests that he invest in him, a truly capable talent. Kyle knows that in life, everything is give and take, and the fastest way to earn favor is to show what one can offer in return. Remtun values the family's benefit and honor above all else, so simply appealing to fatherly emotions would never persuade him. He is the kind of man who would make ruthless decisions for the sake of the family. Kyle once tried to attract his father's attention by causing trouble, believing him to be indifferent, but such methods never worked on Remtun and only backfired. Now, Kyle understands that if both sides' interests align, even strained relationships can improve. This, he believes, is how adults handle things. Hearing all the details of the proposal, the Marquis is deeply shocked, wondering if this is truly the same Kyle he once knew. He concludes that Kyle is no longer the same child as before. Kyle now perceives exactly what his opponent needs and attempts to negotiate, achieving what he desires. The Marquis believes that learning how to use power and authority is an essential virtue for aristocratic children. But to think that Kyle, who used to throw tantrums, would say something so composed makes the Marquis realize that the child he once thought was a failure and neglected has grown up remarkably. Thinking that, the Marquis decides to agree to Kyle's proposal and recognize him as a valuable asset to the Salterian family. He decides to provide all the necessary funds and magic stones for Kyle's studies, but in return, Kyle must prove his worth. Kyle smiles upon hearing that and assures the Marquis that he will live up to his expectations. A few days later, Leonhardt and Urgel visit Kyle's new workshop, which is filled with various items. Kyle happily asks them to look around his new workspace. He explains that he has reinforced the interior with barrier magic and artifacts and equipped it with tools for making potions and crafting items. Smiling proudly, Kyle tells them that there won't be any holes in the walls anymore. Leonhardt looks around the workshop and compliments it, saying it's amazing. He comments that creating such a place must have cost a fortune and then asks Kyle where he got the money, as his usual allowance couldn't possibly cover all this. Kyle cheerfully explains that it's all his father's money, adding that he simply showed a bit of charm, and the Marquis gladly provided the funds. Later, Kyle excitedly tells his father about the things he needs, while the Marquis quietly watches him, still thinking to himself whether Kyle is really the same child from before. Leonhardt, startled by Kyle's words, nervously remarks that Kyle's charm really worked on the Marquis. After that, Kyle calls Urgel over, and she asks if there's something he needs her to do. Kyle confirms that it's not about that, but explains that since it's difficult to use spirit magic inside this room, he has prepared a separate space for it. They enter the next room, and Urgel looks around at all the magic stones and equipment laid neatly inside. The area is soundproofed, allowing her to practice spirit magic without worry. Not only that, Kyle has also gathered books and spirit stones so she can use them freely. Looking around nervously, Urgel asks Kyle if she can really use the space for herself, even though it's right next to his workshop. Kyle confirms that she can use it as much as she likes. As Kyle mentioned before, he wants Urgel to become his trusted aide, not just a maid who serves him, but someone who can grow into an irreplaceable spirit user. Urgel feels deeply moved hearing that and begins to cry. Kyle becomes startled seeing her tears. She quickly tells him that she will work very hard, learn diligently, and become someone truly helpful to him. Hearing that, Kyle notices a system notification showing that Urgel's favorability has risen to 70. Kyle smiles and tells her yes, looking pleased. Urgel wipes her tears, but suddenly, a nearby magic stone begins to shine. A magic circle appears beneath where Urgel is standing, startling both her and Kyle. Kyle asks Urgel what's happening and why the spirit magic circle is reacting, wondering if she just used spirit magic. Urgel is equally shocked and insists that she didn't do anything. Then, before their eyes, light gathers in front of them. A small creature materializes, glowing with a yellow light. Kyle's eyes widen in surprise as he realizes that it's a spirit summoning. The creature immediately floats over to Urgel and hugs her tightly. Seeing that, Kyle watches curiously and concludes that it must be a summoned spirit, considering how it instantly clung to Urgel. Urgel gently holds the creature and wonders aloud if it's truly a spirit, while Kyle thinks to himself that it's exactly as expected from someone with the eternal friend of spirits talent. He smiles and compliments Urgel, telling her she's already capable of summoning spirits. Urgel, surprised and a bit confused, responds that she didn't even do anything to make it happen. Kyle explains that spirit magic is different from casting spells or reciting incantations because it involves sensing the spirit's energy and nature through one's soul. When Urgel's emotions became heightened, the spirit stones in the workshop reacted and summoned the spirit on their own. Hearing that explanation, Kyle looks at the small creature, thinking about how emotions can affect magic. He then tells Urgel to look at the table where the spirit stones were placed, but now, they are all gone. Urgel is shocked and asks if she really used all of them, wondering what she should do. Kyle calmly tells her that it's fine, explaining that the stones were meant to be used for that purpose anyway. Kyle starts thinking that he didn't expect a spirit to be summoned so quickly, while Urgel worries about having used up all the spirit stones that Kyle provided. Meanwhile, Kyle wonders what kind of spirit it is and tries to check its information. However, the status window reports that the target is a high-ranking entity, meaning it cannot be identified using the insight skill. Even though the spirit appears small, it's classified as high-ranking, making the skill ineffective. Left with no choice, Kyle asks Urgel if she knows what kind of spirit it is. Urgel decides to ask the creature directly and begins speaking to it in an unknown language. After a moment of communication, she turns back to Kyle and explains that the creature's name is Ashiris, an ancient spirit of light. Kyle is shocked to hear that the chubby little spirit is actually an ancient spirit of light. Ashiris seems offended by his reaction and speaks rapidly in its own language. Ancient spirits are so rare that even top-level spirit mages might only be able to summon one after using countless spirit stones and praying for days. And to think that Urgel summoned one unconsciously, and in a single attempt, leaves Kyle completely astonished. Kyle comments that Ashiris seems too playful for an ancient spirit, which makes the spirit angry. It flies at him in irritation, lightly bumping into him. Urgel quickly warns Kyle that Ashiris isn't in its true form and explains that if it were to revert to its full form, the entire mansion could be damaged. Kyle understands immediately and pats his head, sighing in relief that it didn't escalate further. Leon Hart, who has entered the room, asks Kyle if he's all right, while Urgel gently scolds Ashiris, telling it that such behavior isn't good. Suddenly, she hears something unexpected and tells Kyle that the spirit says it wants to become her friend. Unsure what to do, she asks Kyle for advice. Kyle explains that the spirit is suggesting a contract. Since it was unconsciously summoned by Urgel, it means she is highly compatible with it. Hearing that, Urgel turns to Ashiris and asks softly if it's really all right to form a contract. In response, the spirit begins to float, glowing brightly as a magic circle forms beneath it. Urgel decides to form the most sincere bond possible with Ashiris, the ancient spirit of light. The spirit then records her as its official summoner. Afterward, Ashiris asks Urgel to choose a name for it. Kyle, watching from the side, whispers a suggestion, Padaki. The spirit frowns at the name, but still asks Urgel to confirm it. Smiling shyly, Urgel decides to go with Padaki, and the spirit accepts, completing the registration. Kyle can't help but laugh quietly at the situation. Ignoring his laughter, Padaki flies toward Urgel, who gently says that from now on, he is Padaki. She tells him that she looks forward to working with him and thanks him for becoming her friend. Padaki smiles warmly and hugs her in return. Watching them, Kyle thinks proudly that his talent development project is progressing perfectly. Time passes, and a few days later, Kyle has a tea party with his elder brother, Adolf, who apologizes to Kyle for not paying much attention to him despite being his older brother. Kyle replies modestly that it's nothing and that he should have been the one to reach out to Adolf first. Urgel serves the tea and asks if there is anything else they need. Kyle tells her to go rest since she has worked hard. Urgel nods, takes the order, and begins leaving. As she walks away, Adolf glances at her and asks Kyle if that girl is the one from the slave market, then comments on her beauty. Adolf then tells Kyle that he happens to need a new maid and asks if Kyle can send her to him. Kyle is instantly shocked and angered upon hearing that, calling Adolf a scoundrel in his thoughts. He realizes Adolf is only visiting because he heard the news that Kyle has recovered from Hermimu, and yet, the first thing he says is that. Deciding to act innocently, Kyle nervously replies, asking Adolf if he could take another servant instead of her. Adolf is taken aback by Kyle's reaction, watching his expressions closely. Kyle continues acting childishly because, To turn the situation around without raising suspicion, this is the only possible way, which makes Adolf realize the situation. Laughing, Adolf tells Kyle that he was only joking and that he's not such a terrible person that he would take away someone Kyle likes. Adolf confirms that he was just teasing and laughs loudly. Going along with the flow, Kyle acts embarrassed and tells Adolf not to tease him like that, pretending to be flustered. Adolf smiles, thinking to himself that he will give up for now because he can't afford to antagonize Kyle yet. Adolf has heard rumors that the prodigal son has reformed, but seeing Kyle react with such emotion at a young age, he believes that Kyle might still be a lost cause. However, this works better for Adolf, since it will make it easier to manipulate and eventually corrupt Kyle toward his own ambitions. Adolf compliments Kyle, saying that if he had known Kyle was such an amusing younger brother, he would have befriended him much earlier. He also comments that Kyle's health seems to have improved significantly. Hearing that, Kyle confirms that he no longer has any major problems in his daily life. Although Hermamu isn't completely healed, it is gradually getting better. Adolf asks if it's really not fully healed yet, and Kyle explains that it's a long-term illness, so it's difficult to recover all at once, but assures Adolf that it is steadily improving. After that, Kyle cheerfully asks Adolf to take a look at something and shows him the magic spell he created, which is about 1.5 times more powerful than ordinary magic. After demonstrating it, Kyle asks for Adolf's opinion. Adolf seems more intrigued by Kyle than before and compliments him, saying that it's very impressive that he can even create magic himself. Kyle thanks him innocently, smiling. Although his illness isn't fully cured, Kyle is growing rapidly. At the student level of a first circle mage, this won't affect his position in the succession line. Adolf recalls when Daisy had informed him that Kyle's attitude had changed dramatically, as if he were a different person entirely, and that his magical skills were growing at an alarming rate. At the time, Adolf had thought Daisy's report was exaggerated, but now, seeing Kyle in person, he decides it's best to remain cautious. Even so, Adolf convinces himself that Kyle is still just a 13-year-old boy and not worth worrying about too much. For now, Adolf believes it will be more beneficial to coax Kyle and use him in various ways. When he becomes useless, Adolf plans to simply discard him. After coming to that conclusion, Adolf looks at Kyle and says directly that he has a question, whether Kyle is thinking of joining his side. Kyle acts surprised and asks what Adolf means by that. Adolf studies Kyle's reaction as the room falls silent, but in reality, this is exactly what Kyle had wanted. After a while, the two continue their conversation. Eventually, Adolf agrees to something and tells Kyle that he will get their father's permission for it. Kyle thanks his brother Adolf for trusting him with the matter. After that, Adolf leaves the room and notices Leonhardt standing outside. Leonhardt greets him politely, wishing him a safe journey, which startles Adolf. He hadn't expected Leonhardt to be there. Adolf thinks to himself that Leonhardt is a tough one, hard to read and harder to manipulate. Even though Leonhardt has been won over somewhat, he still hasn't fully chosen a side. Still, Adolf believes that this is better than having Leonhardt join Abel's faction. So for now, it's fine if Kyle remains under Leonhardt's supervision. Adolf mutters mockingly that Leonhardt looks miserable now, the once celebrated knight forced to guard a kid. Leonhardt ignores the remark completely and enters the room. Kyle informs him that the discussion is over and that his brother Adolf has told him to join the subjugation team. Kyle will probably be working under Viscount Jerome, one of Adolf's close aides from the 5th Legion. This mission will serve as Kyle's first test of loyalty to his brother Adolf, and at the same time, it's an opportunity for him to gain recognition from the Gonda family. Leonhardt silently observes Kyle and says that if Kyle is joining the subjugation team, then he will join as well. However, Kyle quickly refuses, telling Leonhardt not to follow him because if he does, Adolf will become suspicious. But Kyle needs to earn Adolf's trust, and he can't take his father's men with him. Despite that, Leonhardt insists on going with him because he believes it's dangerous and could be a trap. Kyle agrees that it could indeed be a trap, but explains that Adolf won't trust him easily. This mission is most likely a test to see how useful Kyle is in real combat. Kyle believes there's a high chance that Adolf will intentionally expose him to danger. However, Kyle shows his magic and confidently claims that he can at least protect himself now, so Leonhardt doesn't need to worry. He also adds that he won't be showing his full power during the mission. Then, with a knowing smile, Kyle asks Leonhard if he has ever heard of the torque function. The scene then shifts to the party's camp. In the southern region of the Traston territory, there lies a dense forest filled with a monster colony. The Celterian Marquis regularly sends out teams to subjugate the monsters there. Standing in the camp among the soldiers, Kyle is greeted by Viscount Jerome, who dismounts from his horse to speak with him. Viscount Jerome tells Kyle that he has heard from Adolf that Kyle will be joining his subjugation team. Kyle smiles innocently and replies that this will be his first real battle, asking the Viscount to please take care of him. Viscount Jerome reassures him to rest easy, promising that he'll protect him. Hearing that, Kyle thinks to himself that there's no way Jerome truly intends to protect him. After all, his favorability toward Kyle is currently at -40. Kyle wonders what he should do and decides that, for now, it's best to avoid Jerome as much as possible. After wrapping up the conversation, Kyle politely excuses himself, saying that he'll be over there preparing. The overly agreeable Viscount Jerome tells him to let him know if he needs anything. As Kyle walks away, Jerome's true thoughts surface. He recalls Adolf's instructions. Since Kyle is only a first circle mage and lacks real combat experience, Jerome's job is to keep an eye on him and evaluate his skills, but to make absolutely sure Kyle doesn't die. Jerome finds the order strange. He wonders why Adolf would give such a cautious task, especially during a dangerous subjugation mission. What could a once-bedridden child with a life-threatening illness possibly do on the battlefield? Jerome concludes that it would be a relief as long as Kyle doesn't hinder the operation. Still, he finds the situation troublesome and decides to just follow orders. The party eventually departs, and the scene shifts to Kyle using his magic in the field. With ease, he defeats several goblins, leaving a deep impression on Viscount Jerome and the other soldiers. In one swift strike of lightning magic, Kyle wipes out an entire group of goblins. As the battle continues, Kyle keeps defeating more enemies, earning the admiration and favor of both Jerome and the soldiers. They begin praising his strength, and Viscount Jerome himself compliments Kyle, calling him amazing and saying that this is the easiest subjugation mission they've ever had. Jerome's favorability toward Kyle shoots up to 50 almost instantly. Kyle can't help but think that he's never encountered such an easy person to win over. His favorability score jumped by 90 points in a single day. Viscount Jerome, now smiling brightly, tells Kyle that Adolf will be very pleased to hear about his outstanding performance. Kyle smirks confidently and strikes a pose, deciding it's time to move forward with the next part of his plan. After clearing the battle, everyone gathers around to eat at night. Sitting together, the soldiers congratulate one another for their victory. Kyle blushes and modestly says that he hasn't done anything to deserve such praise, but Viscount Jerome corrects him, saying that Kyle's magic skills are truly impressive. The other soldiers and knights agree with Viscount Jerome, admitting that they were wrong about Kyle. One of the soldiers remarks that since Kyle is so young and always stayed in the manor, they thought he would struggle with both combat and camping. But Kyle not only joined the battle bravely, he also hasn't complained about the harsh camp life or the food. They all find Kyle very mature for his age. Kyle humbly comments that his brother Adolf has also lived like this whenever he went on monster subjugations. Thinking of that, Kyle adds that he couldn't just act like a spoiled child. His words deeply move the soldiers, and several of them even tear up, saying they didn't know Kyle admired Adolf so sincerely. Viscount Jerome, touched by Kyle's words, tells him not to worry because he will personally report to Adolf how much Kyle respects him and how greatly he excelled in battle. Hearing that, Kyle receives a notification that Viscount Jerome's favorability has increased by 60, along with that of the other soldiers and knights. Kyle can't help but think that they're all very easy targets to win over. Later that night, most of the soldiers fall asleep, except for the night guards and Kyle. Stepping out of his tent, Kyle tells one of the guards that he's going to take a short walk before resting. The guard agrees but advises him not to go too far. Kyle smiles, noticing how relaxed they are, thinking how no one suspects anything simply because he's a child. The knights, encouraged by the day's victory, have fallen asleep from exhaustion. There are only a few sentries awake since they don't expect any danger from goblins, but they have no idea about what's coming. Holding a small bottle in his hand, Kyle chuckles quietly and mutters that he used this item for experience farming back in the game. It's an ogre perfume, an item that summons ogres within a 10-kilometer radius, an invention created by Kyle Saltarian himself. Before departing, when Kyle showed this to Leonhard admitted that he had never heard of such a thing before. That's when Kyle realized he was the first to create it, as the world had not yet discovered the recipe for the ogre perfume. Kyle explains that it's literally a perfume that attracts ogres within a set range. The higher the quality, the larger the radius, and since he crafted it himself, it's extremely potent. Leonhard had warned him that their target was only the goblin colony, and that ogres were high-level monsters that would be too dangerous for the team to handle. But Kyle simply replied that this was exactly what he wanted. 12 expert knights are participating in this subjugation, and while goblins might be manageable, ogres are an entirely different matter. When Kyle looks at the regular soldiers of the 5th Legion, he knows that despite being called a Knight Order, though loyal to Adolf, their individual skills are mediocre at best. These soldiers are former criminals who were gathered and brainwashed through dark powers. The intense brainwashing turned them into fanatics, utterly obedient to Adolf. Through this, Adolf not only expanded his influence, but also proved his ability to control even the most hopeless individuals. Kyle realizes that if Adolf decides to act during the succession ceremony, it could lead to tragedy. Even low-level thugs are this corrupted, so the brainwashed high-ranking knights will be far more dangerous. That's why Kyle plans to weaken the 5th Legion as much as possible before the ceremony begins, starting with those 12 elite knights. They will fight bravely against the ogres, and in the end, Kyle alone will survive the deadly battle. Back in the present, Kyle opens the bottle, releasing the perfume that will lure the ogres. Soon, a two-faced ogre catches the scent and begins approaching. Kyle hides, watching quietly as the creature finds the soldiers' camp and attacks. The soldiers panic, screaming in fear as chaos spreads through the camp. One of the knights yells for everyone to hold their ground, saying it's just a single ogre, but their confidence vanishes when that same knight is struck down effortlessly by the ogre's powerful blow. Seeing this, the remaining soldiers tremble in fear, realizing that if even an expert knight couldn't handle the monster, they stand no chance. Just as despair begins to set in, Kyle steps forward, shouting at them to come to their senses. He reminds them that they are Saltarian knights and must not flee. If they retreat now, the ogre will enter their territory, so they must stop it here, no matter what. Inspired by his words, the soldiers regain their courage and decide to fight. Viscount Jerome rushes into battle after seeing that Kyle is safe. He tells Kyle to leave the fight to him, saying that Adolf had instructed him to ensure Kyle's safety. Jerome urges Kyle to seek cover while he holds off the ogre. However, Kyle refuses, declaring that he will not run away and will stay with the knights to fight alongside them until the very end. He says that if he abandons his men and flees alone, he wouldn't be able to face his brother Adolf afterward. Hearing this, Viscount Jerome is deeply moved and impressed. Kyle then casts haste magic on him, making Jerome's body feel lighter and faster. Kyle tells him that, since he's still a first-class mage, he'll handle support and coordination from the back, while Jerome leads the charge. Jerome nods proudly and tells Kyle to leave it to him. Drawing his sword, he charges forward with renewed vigor, thinking to himself how brave and reliable Kyle has become. Jerome decides that Kyle is indeed an indispensable asset to Adolf, and resolves to report this to his lord. As Jerome leaps into battle, the other knights are inspired. Seeing both Viscount Jerome and the young Lord Kyle refusing to back down, they can't bear to show weakness either. Together, they charge toward the ogre. Kyle follows them, shouting encouragement and urging them to give it everything they have. Deep down, he knows that this is exactly what he planned. The ogre perfume works perfectly, summoning not just one, but several more powerful variants of ogres. Watching from behind, Kyle smirks coldly, thinking that this is the place where the 5th Legion will meet its end. Another knight falls at the hands of the ogre. Viscount Jerome, still fighting fiercely, uses a special technique that makes his eyes glow. He shouts at the ogre, declaring himself as its target. The ogre's eyes also begin glowing as it starts moving erratically. Taking advantage of the opening, Viscount Jerome attacks from behind, continues striking. But despite his efforts, The soldiers grow increasingly terrified as the fully trained knights are being defeated one after another. With only a few left standing, the soldiers begin to lose hope, wondering if they will make it out alive because the ogre is simply too strong. Seeing them tremble in fear, Kyle smiles slightly, thinking that it's better this way. Otherwise, there would be no point to his plan. He decides that he will expose and eliminate every last one of the knights tainted by darkness right here. That is the true purpose of summoning this imposing ogre. Viscount Jerome thinks back in panic, realizing that there were originally 12 high-ranking knights, but now, including himself, only 3 remain. Sweat runs down his face as he wonders if they can really win this fight. Gripping his sword tightly, he considers using their final resort. Then, he recalls Adolf's warning about the power they had gained, the dark energy that made them stronger. Adolf had told them that the dark power flows through them and enhances their strength, but he also warned that if they were to unleash its full potential, they would lose control and could never return to their original form. Smirking at the time, Adolf had explained that once that happened, they would become nothing more than rampaging monsters stripped of their humanity. He had warned them to never use that power carelessly. Now, remembering those words, Viscount Jerome's body begins glowing faintly with dark matter as he prepares to release it. He recalls that Adolf once said that if he used the power, he might be able to defeat even a twin-headed ogre, but afterward, he would not be able to stop his rampage. Still, Jerome believes it's better than dying here. Before he can activate the dark energy, Kyle suddenly intervenes, attacking the ogre with his magic and interrupting Jerome's move. Startled, Jerome looks up to see Kyle standing on a nearby cliff, assuring him that he'll provide magical support and protection while Jerome charges forward. Feeling encouraged, Jerome tells himself that since they have Kyle, their young wizard, on their side, it's too early to use the last resort. Kyle then activates his mental cleaning skill through a magic circle, casting it on all the soldiers and knights. The spell clears their minds and sharpens their focus, filling them with renewed energy and determination. Motivated, the soldiers and knights shout in unison that they are the proud 5th Legion under Lord Adolf's command, vowing to show their true strength against the twin-headed ogre. Together, they charge with all their might, continuing to fight valiantly. Meanwhile, Kyle calmly watches from a distance, starting a silent countdown. When the ogre strikes down one of the 3 remaining knights named Joshua, Kyle continues counting. The ogre then kills the 2nd remaining knight, who had tried to flee but couldn't escape its reach. Now, only Viscount Jerome remains. Kyle quietly counts 1 and smiles coldly. Kyle's priority is eliminating the 12 knights empowered by Adolf. With 11 gone, only Jerome is left, and as expected, he's terrified. Then calls out to Kyle to cast another spell on him, so he can finish the mutant ogre once and for all. Kyle smiles and thinks that it's finally time. He begins casting a spell called Ensar. Suddenly, from the ground beneath Jerome, invisible hands emerge and hold him firmly in place. Jerome panics, shouting and asking what's happening since he can't move at all. He struggles to resist, but it's futile. Kyle calmly tells Jerome to keep his eyes forward, because the ogre is already there. Jerome freezes in horror as he sees the ogre charging toward him. He tries desperately to move, but his body won't respond. The ogre attacks, and Jerome falls in battle. The remaining soldiers, witnessing what happened, are completely shocked and terrified. Now that even Viscount Jerome is gone, they begin to panic, saying that they'll all be next and that they're too weak to survive. The ogre turns its attention toward them and starts advancing, but before it can reach them, Kyle strikes at the monster using his fire spell. Within moments, the massive creature collapses to the ground. The soldiers stare in disbelief, unable to process what just happened. Then, Kyle steps forward and declaring that the monster is dead. The soldiers remain speechless, watching him in awe. Kyle calmly extracts the high-grade inner core from the twin-headed ogre, deciding that it's time to wrap up this deceptive act. He turns to the soldiers and delivers a speech, telling them that the ogre has been defeated and that thanks to Viscount Jerome's brave efforts, he was able to bring it down. The exhausted soldiers, still trembling, listen to him intently. Kyle clenches his fist and declares that this victory belongs to the 12 brave high-ranking knights and to everyone who fought without fear for their lives. He proclaims it as a victory for them all. As the sun rises the next day, its light shines over Kyle, who reassures the soldiers that they succeeded. Hearing those words reignites their spirits. The fear and grief of the night before turn into cheers of triumph. Together, they raise their voices, hailing Kyle as their hero, while he stands among them with a quiet, confident smile. The next day, everyone returns to the estate. The result of the subjugation was officially declared a success. They had eliminated the mutant twin-headed ogre and wiped out the goblin den, which was their original goal. However, there were also significant losses. As they walk back with the injured soldiers, Adolf comes running toward them, looking deeply worried. He asks Kyle if it's true that Viscount Jerome has died. Seeing that, Kyle calls out Adolf's name and pretends to cry, saying that it's true. Viscount Jerome fell in a fierce battle against the mutant ogre. Kyle adds that if Viscount Jerome hadn't fought so bravely, he himself would have died. He wonders silently if Jerome didn't even have the time to use his dark power. For Adolf, losing Viscount Jerome at this stage is a severe blow, not to mention that all the high-level knights were also taken down. Clenching his fist in frustration, Adolf realizes there's nothing he can do now. He decides that they will somehow have to turn this loss into an advantage. While Kyle continues his act, one of the intermediate soldiers expresses concern for him. Adolf then turns to Kyle, relieved that his younger brother has returned safely. He tells Kyle that defeating the mutant ogre was an incredible achievement and credits him for the victory. Kyle softly says that Adolf is his brother, and Adolf steps closer to pat Kyle's head, saying he will personally report everything to their father and make sure Kyle is properly honored for his accomplishments. Acting innocent and pure, Kyle thanks his elder brother with teary eyes. Adolf, however, doesn't seem pleased and soon leaves without another word. Watching him go, Kyle smiles to himself, thinking that Adolf seems to have been completely deceived, for now. Later that night, Kyle sits in his room with Urgel and Leonhard, saying that this is what they call killing two birds with one stone. Sitting comfortably in his chair and patting Padaki, Kyle continues while Urgel dries his hair. He explains that he not only defeated the 5th Legion and gained recognition from Adolf, but also secured the mutant ogre's core. Kyle laughs and says that it's actually killing 3 birds with one stone. Leonhart comments that it was a dangerous plan, but admits that it's a relief Kyle returned safely. He then brings up the mutant ogre again, but Kyle assures him it wasn't that large of one, saying he could have defeated it alone if necessary. He explains that he pretended to be weak only to show that he was capable, yet harmless. Hearing that, Leonhard asks if Kyle plans to continue siding with Adolf and wonders what he intends to do about Abel. Kyle grins, hands Padaki over to Urgel, and tells Leonhard to just wait and see. Padaki flies to Urgel, and Kyle points his thumb at himself, confidently saying that his elder brother Abel will be seeking him out soon. A few days later, a meeting is held in the Salterian conference room. All major authorities, including the Marquis, Adolf, and Abel, are present. Kyle stands beside his father. The Marquis opens the session, stating that the purpose of today's meeting is to review the results of the recent expedition. He adds that they will also discuss Kyle's contributions, which were crucial in defeating the mutant ogre. The Marquis then invites anyone with objections to speak. Upon hearing about Kyle's contribution, the nobles begin whispering among themselves. Adolf quietly thinks that his father's words might work in his favor. It could be an opportunity to persuade Kyle further. However, Adolf's thoughts are interrupted when someone raises an objection. A black-haired man lifts his hand and remarks that Kyle's role in the expedition is being greatly exaggerated. The man is Baron Hemington. Hearing this, the Marquis calmly asks what Baron Hemington means by that. Hemington replies that while he understands the Marquis's affection for his youngest son, it's unrealistic to overstate Kyle's accomplishments. He points out that Kyle is still just a first-circle wizard, an apprentice who has only recently started learning magic. Considering all the past trouble Kyle has caused, Hemington insists that it's excessive to commend him merely for participating in the expedition and returning alive. He continues, adding that it's difficult to believe Kyle could have matured so suddenly, as everyone knows how many incidents he has caused before. Other barons begin nodding, agreeing that there's some truth to what Hemington said, and express concern that Kyle might cause more problems in the future. Kyle, keeping a composed smile, thinks to himself that Hemington is quite bold to speak this way in front of him. Still, Kyle understands why. His past reckless reputation has given them the confidence to look down on him this way. Kyle decides to respond to Hemington, commenting that he should try fighting a mutant ogre himself before making any kind of judgment. Then, Kyle adds that only after such an experience would it be appropriate to talk about it, since it's not as easy as it sounds. He calmly says that Hemington would understand if he went through it himself. Adolf really likes Kyle's reply, while Hemington is left speechless, unable to respond. Abel then steps in, supporting Kyle, and tells Hemington that even senior high-level knights would struggle to defeat a regular ogre. So fighting a mutant ogre, which is more than twice as strong, and returning alive is practically a miracle. Kyle is surprised to see Abel defending him. Hemington replies that it's only because the knights risked their lives to protect Kyle, pointing out that all 12 high-level knights except Kyle were killed. Abel continues, saying that despite their sacrifice, the one who landed the final blow on the mutant ogre was Kyle, as confirmed by the testimonies of the surviving soldiers. Abel explains that although Kyle may have been reckless in his childhood, he performed admirably in this expedition and is now diligently studying magic. Therefore, Abel tells Hemington to set aside his bias and acknowledge Kyle's accomplishments. Hemington tries to speak again, but Adolf interrupts him, firmly telling him to stop ruining the mood and keep quiet. Adolf slams his fist on the table, demanding to know if Hemington believes he has the right to criticize Kyle, who is a direct heir of the Marquis family, based on irrelevant past incidents. He sharply asks whether Hemington is trying to overstep his authority. Terrified, Hemington immediately denies it, saying he would never dare. Meanwhile, Kyle is more shocked than anyone else, wondering why even Adolf is suddenly taking his side. He thinks that everyone seems eager to praise him, Adolf calling him the pillar of the family, and Abel describing him as a diligent scholar. Adolf clears his throat to get their father's attention and points at Kyle, saying he agrees that Kyle's achievements deserve proper recognition, since the 5th Legion under Adolf's command testified that Kyle fought bravely. Hearing that both Abel and Adolf support Kyle, the Marquis concludes that there will be no further objections and officially acknowledges Kyle's achievements. The Marquis then places his hand on the table and announces that, starting today, Kyle's probation will be officially lifted. He will now be granted free access to the main residence and permission to go outside. Kyle feels overjoyed hearing this declaration. However, the Marquis continues, explaining that the remains from the mutant ogre will be distributed evenly based on contribution. Therefore, Kyle will not receive any. Kyle is stunned by the announcement, frozen in disbelief. The Marquis ends the meeting, declaring it concluded and dismissing everyone. As the nobles stand and begin to leave, Kyle remains in shock, thinking about how, despite his achievements being recognized, he's still not receiving any rewards. He wonders why. Kyle quickly stops his father, putting on a charming smile, and asks if he truly doesn't get anything even after going through all that effort. The Marquis glances at him and asks if Kyle is lacking in anything. Then, leaning closer, he whispers that he kept the ogre core. Kyle freezes, realizing that the Marquis had noticed everything. He smiles nervously, complimenting his father for being a true sword master. Trying to play it off, Kyle replies that he isn't lacking anything and that being freed from probation is more than enough. The Marquis nods and tells Kyle to continue doing well, saying that he trusts him. After saying that, he leaves the room. A moment later, Adolf calls out to Kyle, reminding him that he kept his promise to report Kyle's achievements to their father. He then tells Kyle to remember how much he cares for him. Kyle, going along with the act, thanks Adolf while thinking internally about how much his brother loves to show off. As they speak, Abel approaches them and comments that Kyle has changed a lot. He then tells Kyle that they need to have a private conversation. During tea, Abel finally drops a bombshell. He's about to share a secret so big that even their father doesn't know it. Kyle had expected Abel to seek him out eventually, but this level of pressure? That was completely unexpected. Just moments earlier, after the meeting ended, Abel stopped Kyle to praise his performance in the recent battle. He even revealed that he knew Kyle had officially become a proper magician, despite still being in the trust circle. After some casual conversation, Abel invited Kyle to join him for tea after dinner, claiming he wanted to hear more about Kyle's achievements during the expedition. Kyle had already anticipated this approach. Still, sitting here now, he can't ignore the tension. He knows Abel's invitation was just an excuse. Abel didn't come all this way for small talk. He came with a purpose. And when Abel suddenly hints at revealing a major secret, Kyle realizes he can no longer predict his brother's true intentions. It quickly becomes clear Abel wants to recruit him. With the looming threat of the Saltarian Marquis rebellion, an uprising that their second brother, Adolf, is destined to ignite, Abel understands that his own power must grow stronger. To survive the coming political storm, especially within this high-stakes fantasy world, Kyle needs the protection of the Saltarian Marquis faction. Every word he says now could determine his future. So Kyle forces an awkward laugh and carefully suggests that perhaps Abel's secret is better left unsaid. He claims he's curious about Adolf's hidden plans, but in truth, he's afraid of what Abel might demand in exchange for such confidential information. A heavy silence fills the room. Abel's expression shifts as he calmly asks whether Kyle truly believes he would try to gain something from him. Kyle responds with composed honesty. He admits that while he is currently associated with Adolf's camp, he does not truly support him. However, that doesn't mean he intends to side with Abel either. The scene cuts to the training grounds. Adolf is practicing his swordsmanship when his loyal mate approaches him with urgent news. Abel has entered Kyle's room. Though the guards prevented her from overhearing their conversation, the mere fact that they met is enough to spark suspicion. Adolf is furious. He was the first to take interest in Kyle, and he has no intention of letting Abel claim him so easily. If Kyle ever tries to switch sides, Adolf is prepared to eliminate the problem entirely. In fact, he has already planted his loyal mate close to Kyle, just in case. Back in Kyle's room, the tension takes an unexpected turn. Abel is visibly shocked when Kyle explains that the real reason he can't join Abel's side is because Abel is simply too kind. Kyle acts shy and flustered, while Abel gets confused and embarrassed hearing this. But Kyle's words aren't random flattery. He quietly attempts to use his insight skill on Abel, only to fail. Abel's rank is too high for him to perceive his essence. What truly stuns Kyle, however, is Abel's overwhelming favorability toward him. Aside from Ursiel, no one has ever viewed this so-called good-for-nothing Kyle so positively. For a brief moment, Kyle wonders if Abel might actually be some kind of saint. Trying to maintain the mood, Kyle insists once more that Abel is a genuinely good person. But Abel quickly corrects him. It's not kindness. He says he simply feels regret. Regret for failing to properly look after Kyle all these years. Abel's voice carries genuine remorse as he apologizes for neglecting him. Kyle, however, feigns confusion and gently tells his brother there's no need to apologize at all. Abel can't help but be amazed by Kyle's sharp tongue. Smiling faintly, he admits that if he had known Kyle was this witty, he would have tried to connect with him much sooner. Then Abel reveals his true intention. He offers Kyle everything Adolf promised, only with even better conditions. And just because Kyle called him kind doesn't mean he plans to step back. Kyle responds honestly. He says he was simply speaking from the heart. At the very least, Abel wouldn't harm him for joining Adolf's faction. Adolf, however, is different. Kyle explains that Adolf has a cruel personality. If Adolf ever sees him as a hindrance, he won't hesitate to remove him. And Kyle knows his own limits. He's only a Frost Circle rookie who barely managed to overcome Hermamo. He doesn't have the strength to protect himself against someone like Adolf. Abel is stunned. No one in the family has ever made such a bold and extreme assessment of Adolf. Yet Kyle speaks with unsettling clarity. With careful wording, Kyle even guides Abel into understanding why he cannot openly join his side. At that point, Abel reveals something unexpected. He says his only trivial skill is having strong intuition. Ever since childhood, he has been able to sense when something bad was about to happen. By trusting those instincts, he has avoided numerous dangerous situations. But now, as the succession ceremony draws closer, those ominous feelings are intensifying. Most of all, he senses something dangerous about Adolf. Abel has no concrete proof, no evidence he could use to persuade anyone. That's why he has kept these concerns to himself. Even so, he believes that Adolf, though extreme and ambitious as the second direct descendant of the Marquis, wouldn't go so far as to cross an unforgivable line. Yet here he is, secretly monitoring both Adolf and Kyle, all because of a persistent foreboding. Kyle, on the other hand, immediately realizes Abel's intuition is accurate. The level of perception Abel describes feels close to low-grade precognition. In this world, talents can evolve, and circumstances can change people in unexpected ways. Kyle tells Abel he believes in that intuition. If Adolf becomes the successor, the Saltarian family will fall into ruin. And when that day comes, no one will be safe. Abel is deeply impressed by Kyle's reasoning and insight. So he asks the most important question. What's your plan? Kyle reveals it without hesitation. He intends to pretend to join Adolf's faction. For a time, he will act like a loyal supporter, lowering Adolf's guard while quietly observing everything. When the right moment comes, he will move against him, but only if Abel agrees to support him from behind. After laying out the strategy, Kyle asks directly if Abel is willing to help. Without a second thought, Abel extends his hand. He agrees to stand behind Kyle and provide his support. And the moment Abel says yes, Kyle immediately makes one request. A few days later, Leonhardt, summoned by Kyle, is stunned to see the desk covered with stacks of platinum coins, far more than his average salary. His surprise only grows when he learns that all this wealth came from Kyle's elder brother, Abel. Kyle explains that he initially planned to borrow just a small amount, but Abel, kind as ever, gave him the entire sum as a gift. Kyle is genuinely thrilled, while Leonhardt watches nervously, unsure how to react. Then Leonhardt notices a personal communication device, also a gift from Abel. Abel had told Kyle it would make contacting each other more convenient. Leonhardt is astounded. The device alone is so expensive it could buy a mansion with a garden. Kyle calmly notes that he already knew this, which is why the device was simplified. It can only communicate directly with Abel. Understanding the situation, Leonhardt remarks that Kyle's conversation with Abel must have gone exceptionally well. Kyle agrees and instructs Leonhardt to keep the money safe, as they will need it soon. Once Leonhardt takes custody, he asks what they intend to do with such a massive sum. Kyle clarifies that the workshop renovation is complete, and they recently acquired magic stones and spirit stones, so there's no need to buy more for a while. This time, Kyle's goal isn't simply to purchase assets, it's to make money. This fund will serve as their investment capital. The scene then shifts to the dungeon. Urgel struggles to make the staff glow, but all she succeeds in doing is summoning Flapper. Flapper immediately climbs onto Kyle's head, looking worried, but Kyle calmly permits it. Meanwhile, Leonhardt grows increasingly uneasy. He questions why they are inside a dungeon at all. Kyle acts nonchalant, claiming they simply found one along the way. Leonhardt isn't convinced. He had been told they were leaving the house only to visit Infilum, a neighboring estate. Yet Kyle abruptly stops the carriage and enters the dungeon. Leonhardt exhales deeply and suggests leaving immediately, warning it's too dangerous for the three of them. Kyle, however, asks why they should leave and reveals that their dungeon exploration is just beginning. Leonhardt shouts in frustration, pointing out that monsters are swarming at the cave entrance. But as they venture deeper, the number of monsters thins out. This indicates a powerful boss lies ahead. Mid to low-level monsters avoid the area out of fear. Leonhardt admits he's managed so far, but beyond this point, he has no idea what might appear. Leonhardt immediately suggests turning back, but his shock is palpable when he realizes Kyle's target, the dungeon boss. Leonhardt is stunned that Kyle had known about this from the very beginning, feigning the visit to Infilum as an excuse. Kyle clarifies that he truly did have business in Infilum, but he already knew the dungeon was along the way. If he had revealed this from the start, the number of knights assigned to guard them would have multiplied. Not only that, but both Adolf and Abel would have sent spies and additional guards, creating chaos if a fight broke out. Kyle is also mindful of keeping Urgel's spirit magic training a secret from both brothers, as well as keeping Flapper away from prying eyes. And perhaps most importantly, too many people would prevent Kyle from collecting all the loot for himself. He intends to sweep it all up. Despite these explanations, Leonhardt insists it's reckless for only the three of them to face a dungeon boss. He reminds Kyle that he is an expert-level knight. Urgel is just beginning spirit magic, and Kyle has only recently reached the second circle of magic. Leonhardt's disbelief is clear. Kyle's expression changes. Calmly, he warns Leonhardt not to mistake his quiet demeanor at home for weakness. Leonhardt has seen firsthand how Kyle's magic, after overcoming Hermimu, is far stronger than ordinary magic. Leonhardt hesitates, but Kyle reassures him that their team is more than capable. Leonhardt is the tank, Urgel the healer, and Kyle the damage dealer. Together, they already have everything needed for the battle. Kyle confirms that his power will only grow from here and tells Leonhardt he must make a choice: pledge loyalty to Kyle or remain devoted to his father. A knight with two masters is unnecessary. Kyle wants one who will follow him alone. Leonhardt clenches his sword. Kyle observes silently, understanding that Leonhardt is still bound by Rempton's orders to guard him. No matter how faithfully Leonhardt serves, his true master is still the Marquis, not Kyle. For now, simply showing strength would not win over such a rigid, loyal knight. It could even backfire. Kyle smiles faintly to himself. Leonhardt's hesitation is enough for now. When the moment comes that he fully acknowledges Kyle as his true master, their party finally steps into the boss room, where the massive Minotaur sits resting on a chair. The dungeon, known as the Minotaur's secret sanctuary, is famous in fantasy defense games, especially among beginners, for farming. There are no traps, the path is short, monsters are few, and most importantly, the rewards are generous relative to the difficulty. This is exactly why Kyle wants to claim the treasure for himself and share it with no one. Leonhardt takes in the sight of the Minotaur, a creature said to be 3 times stronger than an ogre. Kyle agrees with him but adds a crucial point. The Minotaur doesn't use magic, yet its brute strength is devastating. Anyone who tries to block its massive hammer without channeling sword energy would get severely injured. Kyle outlines the strategy. Leonhardt will take the front line, drawing the Minotaur's attention while blocking its hammer attacks. Kyle will cast a shield to boost Leonhardt's defense. With his sword energy amplified and the shield protecting him, Leonhardt should be able to withstand the Minotaur's heavy strikes. However, Kyle warns him of one deadly attack. When the enraged Minotaur charges like a bull and performs its whirlwind attack, Leonhardt must dodge at all costs. Blocking it, even with a reinforced shield, would be fatal. He must lure the boss to the edges of the arena, dodging as much as possible. Once the whirlwind ends, the Minotaur will be exhausted, giving the team the perfect opportunity to unleash their final attacks. Leonhardt nods, understanding his role. Kyle then instructs Urgel to cast buffs on both himself and Leonhardt before the fight begins. Since this is her first real battle, Kyle reassures her that if she feels scared, she can simply cast buffs and take cover behind a rock. Urgel beams, feeling honored. She declares that she has only studied spirit magic to protect her master, Kyle, and is determined to show the results of her training today. Kyle, impressed by her resolve, reminds her not to overexert herself and to always maintain a safe distance. He emphasizes that if she senses danger, she must protect herself above all, because as the party's healer and buffer, her safety is critical. Kyle explains the importance of her role. As long as she remains safe, they always have a chance to survive and succeed. Urgel feels a strong sense of justice and an unshakable desire to protect her master, while Leonhardt watches Kyle explain the strategy like a seasoned tactician. Kyle talks about the dungeon's hidden location, the critical role of a healer in battle, and the precise strategy to take down the Minotaur, knowledge typically gained only through real-world experience. Leonhardt can't help but wonder how Kyle, who has been confined to the estate, could know so much. Curiosity gets the better of him, and he asks Kyle directly. Hearing the question, Kyle panics. For a moment, he forgets that he is supposed to be just a 13-year-old boy. Even a magical prodigy knowing all these advanced strategies seems unusual. To deflect, Kyle claims he learned it all during the goblin hunts. Leonhardt, ever sharp, immediately spots the flaw. There's no way a goblin hunting party, who could barely handle an ogre, would know the Minotaur's attack patterns or characteristics. Kyle's heart races, imagining being discovered. Thinking quickly, Kyle fabricates another excuse. He secretly read military strategy books. Leonhardt is genuinely impressed. Kyle is shocked that the lie worked. Leonhardt continues praising him, saying even the Marquis would be proud of how much Kyle has grown. Urgel joins in, declaring Kyle always amazing and cool. Their admiration and affection toward Kyle increase, and even Leonhardt, who appears stern and hard to please, is surprisingly easy to convince. After this moment, Kyle begins considering crafting a consistent explanation for his knowledge of the world, realizing he can't rely solely on being labeled a magical genius forever. Finally, Urgel casts two skills. The first, Light Empowerment, boosts Kyle and Leonhardt's health and defense by 30% while enhancing mana and sword energy. The second, Light's Healing, restores health and applies an automatic healing effect over a set duration. Kyle notices the significant improvement and praises her progress. With everything in place, Kyle orders Leonhardt to attack the Minotaur. The moment Leonhardt engages, he immediately feels the difference. Kyle's protective shield combined with Urgel's buffs strengthens him beyond expectation. The Minotaur, enraged at intruders daring to take its treasure, bellows threats at the humans. While the Minotaur is distracted, Kyle launches a precise long-range attack, casting Ice Lance. Seizing the opening, Leonhardt strikes while Kyle continues to provide support from behind. A series of precise and cunning attacks enrages the Minotaur, forcing it to swing its massive hammer at Leonhardt. Acting quickly, Kyle casts Stone Silt, forming a protective shield around Leonhardt to guard against the Minotaur's strongest attack. Even with the shield, the force is overwhelming. If Kyle hadn't perfectly timed the shield with his Stone Skin spell, Leonhardt's hand would have been injured. Leonhardt watches in awe, mixed with unease. Kyle's magic is always precise, almost as if he already knows the Minotaur's next move. His instincts for assessing the battlefield and casting spells are flawless, allowing him to control the flow of the fight. Every action confirms that Kyle is fully in command. Kyle orders Leonhardt to reposition, then casts Ensnare on the Minotaur, restricting its movements before striking with Magic Missile to wear it down. Nervously, Leonhardt asks if the Minotaur is down, but the creature smirks, complimenting them for pushing it this far. Then, the real danger begins. The Minotaur launches its whirlwind attack. Kyle immediately instructs Leonhardt to maintain aggro and lead the boss toward the outskirts. Leonhardt sprints while Kyle and Urgel boost his speed with support magic. He throws a dagger to draw the Minotaur's attention, keeping it focused on him as he runs. Meanwhile, Kyle and Urgel hide behind a pillar, counting down the seconds. Their plan is simple but risky. Avoid the whirlwind, survive the chaos, and strike when the Minotaur tires. With only 5 seconds left, Leonhardt is visibly exhausted. Then, the Minotaur halts. The whirlwind ends just in time, and Kyle's support spells fade simultaneously. If they had been even a moment later, the attack would have obliterated them. Leonhardt can't help but wonder, was this luck, or had Kyle calculated it all from the start? Now it's their moment. Kyle begins casting a new spell, not the Ice Lance used earlier, but a true, devastating magic capable of defeating the Minotaur. The spell lands perfectly, and the battle is over. Afterward, Urgel heals Leonhardt's injuries while Kyle, beaming with excitement, rushes to the treasure chest. He opens it carefully, analyzing the loot inside. Among the treasures, he discovers the Sword of the Rind. Since the Minotaur's treasure includes a greatsword, Kyle immediately decides it's perfect for Leonhardt. Next, he finds Lul's necklace, infused with the energy of nature. A spirit is drawn to it as well, so Kyle gives it to Urgel. Both Leonhardt and Urgel are surprised and deeply impressed by these gifts. Then comes the real prize, the Staff of Bravery. It radiates a bold aura, allowing for faster spellcasting, and comes with Memorize C+, which can store up to 3 spells. Stored spells can be cast without consuming mana, though only up to 2 circle spells. In fantasy defense games, any wizard following the mage tree knows that obtaining this staff from the Minotaur dungeon is an essential strategy. Even a broken staff can be used effectively until higher circles are reached. Kyle can't hide his excitement at acquiring such a weapon. Leonhardt, meanwhile, stares at his new sword, appreciating its craftsmanship and magical effects. He realizes why the Minotaur risked its life guarding it, and can't help but question if he's truly worthy of such a gift, especially since he hadn't been able to answer Kyle's earlier questions properly. Urgel, too, feels guilty, worried that she's only receiving from Kyle and not contributing enough in return. She wonders how she could ever repay him for such generosity. Kyle smiles and corrects her, reminding her that she was the most helpful member of the team today. Leonhardt nods in agreement. admitting that such valuable equipment would be too powerful for him to wield lightly anyway. Kyle exhales and clarifies the real purpose of the gifts. They aren't just rewards, they're tools to make them stronger. Time is short, and they must grow in strength quickly. These artifacts will significantly enhance their abilities. Normally, high-grade dungeon rewards must be reported to the family and distributed according to protocol, but Kyle has no intention of doing so. He refuses to let other family members know about their growing power. Kyle can only trust Leonhardt and Urgel. These artifacts are meant to make them his strength, his shield in the dark times to come. Clenching his fist, he emphasizes that becoming stronger is the only way to survive, especially with the looming threat over the house of Saltarian. After his speech, Kyle asks if they are willing to accept the gifts. Leonhardt and Urgel exchange glances and gladly agree. With their equipment secured and their resolve strengthened, Kyle sets his sights on Infilum, ready for the next stage of their adventure. A few days later, in the granary zone of Infilum, Count Frantel Neron, Lord of Infilum, is furious upon hearing that a member of the House of Saltarian has arrived without prior notice. As he hurries to prepare for the unexpected guest, he asks his butler which son has arrived, but even the butler isn't certain, only that the visitor bears the symbol reserved for direct descendants of the Marquis. Frantel worries that the family might be trying to drag his territory into their ongoing succession conflict. The butler reminds him of an unwritten rule: other families should not interfere in succession disputes. Taking a deep breath, Frantel enters the room and demands an explanation for the unannounced visit. His shock is immediate when he sees the visitor is actually a young child. Kyle greets Frantel politely and apologizes for arriving without notice. Curious, Frantel asks who he is and is stunned to learn that this is the reckless fourth son of the Marquis of Saltarian. Leonhardt bristles at the revelation, but Kyle calmly permits him to react. He admits that he had acted like a troublemaker until recently, but overcoming Hermimu has changed him. Though still only a first-circle magician, Kyle insists he is doing everything he can to contribute to his family. Frantel, previously convinced that the youngest son was an irredeemable child abandoned by the family, is speechless. Now, looking at Kyle, he sees a completely different person. Clear eyes, polite manners, and a composed demeanor. All the rumors he had heard are proven wrong. Relaxing, Frantel begins a friendly conversation with Kyle and expresses his wishes for the Marquis' prosperous future. He then urges Kyle to get to the main point. There's no way he traveled all this way just to exchange pleasantries. Kyle smiles, apologizing again for the unannounced visit, and explains that, due to the ongoing succession disputes, he preferred to keep his movements secret. The real reason for Kyle's visit is revealed. He wants to purchase grain from Infilum, the largest granary in the north. Frantel is momentarily confused, noting that trade with Saltarius is already regular. Kyle explains that the grain is for magical research. While he can't yet disclose the details, he emphasizes that this is not a one-time purchase. He intends to buy regularly. Kyle also notes that Infilum has had several years of bumper harvests, resulting in a surplus of grain that has begun to accumulate, making regular trade mutually beneficial. That's why Kyle suggests focusing on the old grain that's been giving Frantel trouble. With a snap of his fingers, Leonhardt opens the money box to show the funds Kyle is prepared to offer. Frantel is immediately shocked, wondering where a young boy like Kyle could have obtained such an enormous sum. Maintaining his composure, he ultimately agrees to sell the leftover grain, noting that it's common knowledge that a wizard's research is confidential, so he won't pry into its purpose. Kyle thanks him for understanding. Still cautious, Frantel asks Kyle to confirm the source of the money, especially given how young the buyer is. Kyle calmly reassures him that the funds were a gift from his eldest brother, Abel. Hearing this, Frantel feels pleased. The combination of calm composure from Abel and the youngest son is far preferable to dealing with the scheming second son, Adolf. He agrees to sell the grain. Negotiations begin. Kyle starts at 4 silver, while Frantel counters at 7. Frantel is surprised by Kyle's reasoning. He argues that leaving the old grain will continue to incur storage fees, so it's better to clear it out by purchasing it outright. After a tense back and forth, the deal is struck at 5 silver. Back in his room, Leonhardt compliments Kyle's haggling skills and asks if he learned them from a book. Kyle, slightly confused, casually shrugs it off. In truth, he picked up the skills from online market bargaining. Leonhardt then asks if buying old grain is part of Kyle's larger plan to make money in Influum. Kyle confirms. He intends to buy the grain while it's cheap and sell it later when demand rises. Leonhardt, knowing the estate already has enough stock for the year and seeing the stable supply, is skeptical that this will be profitable. Kyle plays dumb, claiming he's just preparing in advance, though in reality, he knows a massive famine is coming. According to the game's storyline, after the Celetrian succession ceremony, a sudden weather anomaly will trigger widespread famine, causing grain prices to skyrocket. At that point, no one will care if the grain is old or new. Of course, Kyle can't explain that future knowledge to this stubborn knight. Instead of pressing further, Leonhardt decides to trust Kyle, reasoning that everything Kyle has done so far has had a solid purpose. Kyle is stunned. Leonhardt's favorability toward him has skyrocketed to 50, despite being negative when they first met. Touched, Kyle feels deeply moved by this growing trust. Just then, Urgel enters to inform Kyle that Frantel wants to speak with him before dinner. Before the meal, Kyle knocks and enters Frantel's room, only to find a young girl there. Frantel introduces her as his daughter. Iris is a character Kyle never expected to meet this early. In fantasy defense, she gained a strong fan base thanks to her cute appearance and her top 5% A-grade magic talent. Especially in the early stages of the game, when overall levels were low, she was a dependable force. However, she also had serious personality flaws. Because of her unique, luxurious trait, many players left reviews about going bankrupt trying to raise her favorability. She was notoriously difficult to manage. As the game progressed and power inflation took over, introducing abundant S-rank and even SSS rank magicians, Iris, who was capped at A rank, gradually became obsolete. Many players eventually discarded her, seeing no reason to endure her difficult personality for limited long-term value. That's why Kyle is shocked when Count Frantel suddenly attempts to pair his daughter with him. Iris is currently 11 years old. Since she is close to Kyle's age and possesses exceptional magical talent, Count Frantel arranges an introduction, hoping the two can learn from each other. However, it quickly becomes clear that Iris has slightly different thoughts. Kyle introduces himself as the fourth son of the Marquis and quietly activates his insight skill. He discovers that her favorability toward him is -40. He also learns about her talent, Companion of Mana. The revelation astonishes him. Although he possesses mana delay, a talent he never even encountered in the original game, Companion of Mana was ranked as the #1 magic talent. It was said to belong only to the top 0.01% of SSS grade magicians. Perhaps, just like Abel or Urgel, Iris, who was originally capped at A rank in fantasy defense, has awakened new potential in this reality. If she truly holds SSS grade talent, then everything changes. No matter how problematic her personality may be, Kyle cannot afford to let her slip away. Unfortunately, she behaves exactly as she did in the game. She speaks as if she is looking down on him, belittling him for being only a first circle mage while she has already reached the second circle. Kyle realizes she has been arrogant since childhood. Maintaining a calm expression, he confirms that he is indeed first circle, despite having studied magic for only 3 months. This startles Iris. He advanced twice as fast as she did. Still, she mocks him, claiming that beginning magic at 13 is considered very late, since aspiring magicians are expected to start by the age of 10 at the latest. Kyle is irritated by her attitude. He calmly explains that he began learning late because he only recently overcame Hermimu. Iris is momentarily about to compliment him, but her trait activates again, and she continues to belittle him. Count Frantel then clarifies that overcoming Hermimu requires extraordinary inborn magic or aura. Those who survive it are often regarded as genius magicians or knights. For Kyle to overcome such a severe illness at 13 is remarkable, and his future potential is immense. Frantel sincerely hopes Iris will learn from him and grow through their interaction. Despite her father's praise, Iris stubbornly insists that Kyle is beneath her due to his lower circle. As Kyle suspected, her contempt for the weak trait causes her to constantly look down on anyone she perceives as inferior. Recognizing that her personality is the real issue, Kyle decides it is time to correct her behavior. He steps closer and declares that he will prove he is not weaker than her. Iris blushes at the sudden proximity, but challenges him to explain how. Kyle proposes a duel. If he loses, he will admit he is weaker. Iris quickly accepts, but alters the terms. If she wins, he must kneel before her in humiliation. Kyle agrees to her condition, but adds one of his own. If he wins, she must accept him as her teacher and promise never again to look down on someone simply because they are lower ranked or weaker. Confident that a mere first circle mage stands no chance against her, Iris accepts without hesitation. After she leaves the room, Count Frantel confides in Kyle. He admits that Iris's personality issues stem from being spoiled by the entire family since childhood. He worries that if she continues like this, she will struggle to function in society. She has no friends her age and already carries a poor reputation in social circles. Kyle understands that even a devoted father can see when something is wrong. Frantel believes Kyle, who endured a difficult childhood himself, might better understand Iris's psychology. He grants Kyle permission to discipline her if necessary. Kyle is pleased by the approval and resolves to teach her properly, without holding back. Meanwhile, as Iris walks down the hallway, she grumbles about Kyle. Yet deep down, she finds herself slightly intrigued by him. Though she refuses to admit it, her favorability toward Kyle quietly increases. Later that night, Kyle walks through the hallway with Leonhardt and Urgel. Leonhardt quietly suggests that Count Frantel may have introduced Iris with a marriage proposal in mind. The idea sends a chill down Kyle's spine. After all, Iris is only 11 years old. Seeing Kyle's reaction, Leonhardt explains that early engagements are common among nobles. Kyle finally understands why Count Frantel suddenly arranged the introduction. That realization only strengthens his resolve. Leonhardt advises him to go easy on Iris during tomorrow's duel, but Kyle refuses. He cannot accept the idea of marrying someone with such an overbearing attitude simply because of status. If anything, he is now even more determined to defeat her decisively and correct her behavior. Beside him, Urgel listens silently, clenching her hands at the mention of Kyle's possible engagement. The next day, the duel begins. It will be a single-round match where the goal is to subdue the opponent using magic without causing injury. Leonhardt, serving as Kyle's escort knight, acts as referee. Iris does not object. Leonhardt is a renowned high-level knight, respected even in Emilum. As soon as Leonhardt signals the start, Iris launches a fire arrow at Kyle. Her incantation is swift and precise, impressive for an 11-year-old. Even so, she still has room to grow. Kyle calmly counters with wind magic, deflecting the attack. Frustrated at the thought of losing to a first circle mage, Iris casts another fire arrow with full force. Once again, Kyle blocks it with ease. He cannot help but acknowledge her courage and remarkable magical power for her age. This time, Kyle goes on the offensive. He fires a magic missile using double casting, displaying refined technique. Count Frantel is visibly shocked by the level of control Kyle demonstrates. Iris hurriedly raises a shield spell, but Kyle's wind magic overwhelms it. She prepares to cast again, but it is too late. Leonhardt declares Kyle the winner. However, Iris's pride cannot accept losing to a first circle magician. Claiming she was momentarily unwell, she demands a rematch. Kyle agrees calmly, stating that the outcome will not change. Confident she can turn things around, Iris tries again, only to lose once more. The pattern repeats. Kyle wins 5 consecutive rounds. Iris becomes visibly exhausted, her magical power nearly depleted. Kyle suggests ending the duel, noting that she has likely run out of mana. Unable to endure the humiliation any longer, Iris finally breaks down in tears. Count Frantel immediately rushes forward to comfort his daughter. That evening, at Count Frantel's mansion, Kyle is provided formal attire for a banquet. Although it is described as a small family gathering, the occasion is still formal, and Leonhardt advises him to dress appropriately. Kyle remains puzzled by the invitation. He has just defeated and made the Count's daughter cry, yet he is being treated as an honored guest. Leonhardt believes Count Frantel anticipated this outcome. In fact, Kyle's overwhelming victory may have strengthened the Count's desire to connect their families. Kyle assumes Iris must despise him now, but Leonhardt disagrees. He soon notices something surprising about Kyle. Despite his vast knowledge and composure, he is completely inexperienced when it comes to romance. At least in that regard, Kyle still seems like someone his age, and for Leonhardt, that is oddly reassuring. With Urgel's help, Kyle finishes preparing for the banquet. Dressed formally, he looks remarkably handsome, ready to face whatever Count Frantel has planned next. After entering the banquet hall, Kyle is greeted by Count Frantel's sons, Myers and Lehman. Both appear friendly and engage him in light conversation. However, Iris is nowhere to be seen. Noticing her absence, Count Frantel instructs a maid to call her. Kyle feels slightly guilty, wondering if Iris might refuse to come because he made her cry earlier. Still, moments later, she enters the room accompanied by the maid. But the moment she sees Kyle, her cheeks turn red. Kyle is surprised she decided to attend at all, given how upset she had been. Meanwhile, Iris is equally surprised by how handsome Kyle looks dressed formally. With everyone present, Count Frantel announces the start of dinner and asks Kyle to sit beside Iris. Kyle hesitates internally but takes the seat nonetheless. While seated, he discreetly activates his insight skill and is astonished to see that her favorability has increased by 30 points. Ever humble, Kyle assumes this shift may be influenced by her vanity trait. The meal proceeds in a more pleasant atmosphere than expected. Iris behaves calmly in front of her family, refraining from her usual arrogance. However, when she asks her brother to pass the pepper, despite it being within Kyle's reach, Kyle instinctively hands it to her instead. Their fingers briefly touch, startling Iris. Her face flushes again, while Kyle, oblivious to the reason, simply places the pepper nearby. Even though her favorability has increased, Kyle feels her behavior is becoming even more complicated to understand. The next day, Iris unexpectedly seeks Kyle out. She reminds him of his promise and asks him to become her teacher. She wants to learn why his magic is so powerful. Having observed his casting during their duel, she recognizes that his method differs from conventional techniques and suspects he developed it himself. She wants to learn everything from him. Kyle agrees, but only under strict conditions. If she wishes to become his student, she must change her attitude. He tells her she must be polite to others, stop looking down on the weak, control her stubbornness, and think carefully before acting out of anger. Iris, who has always been spoiled by her family, grows furious at these demands. However, Kyle stands firm. He has no intention of teaching her if she refuses to change. When she continues to resist, Kyle reveals that his magic relies on a unique system he personally developed, a hybrid casting method he has never published or shared. There is nowhere else she could possibly learn it. Being taught directly by the creator would be an extraordinary opportunity, something any serious magic student would understand. Iris understands the significance, but her pride clashes with her desire to learn. After a long internal struggle, she finally agrees to his conditions. Yet Kyle is not naive. He knows she might pretend to behave only in front of him. To prevent that, he presents a prepared magic contract. The document clearly states that Iris accepts his conditions and will formally become his disciple. Once signed, breaking the agreement will trigger an absolute penalty enforced by divine power. The contract's authority stems from ancient gods, making it unbreakable by ordinary magic. Iris is outraged by the severity of it, until Kyle reveals that the contract was prepared by her own father, Count Frantel. After witnessing their sparring match, Frantel handed over this rare magical artifact. The Frantel family possesses only 2 such contracts. This revelation shocks Iris even more. Furious, she attempts to leave the room to confront her father. Kyle stops her calmly and warns that if she walks out now, the agreement will be void. He will not teach her, and they will part ways permanently. She freezes at his words. Kyle gives her a clear choice: sign the contract and become his disciple, or walk away and never see him again. Kyle decides he will tolerate Iris's whining only until today. Even if she possesses the potential of a rare SSS class talent, it means nothing if her character does not align with his goals. He needs reliable allies and subordinates, not someone he must constantly coddle and appease. If her personality proves incompatible, he is prepared to walk away. Lost in thought, Iris suddenly grabs the pen and signs the contract, surprising him. Before she does, Kyle reminds her to read the terms carefully. In the agreement, Kyle is listed as the first party and Iris as the second. The penalty for violating most clauses is described as a slight stomachache. Hearing this, Iris visibly relaxes. She had expected something far worse. After reviewing the conditions, she appears satisfied. Kyle smiles faintly. She agrees confidently, unaware that the consequences will feel very real once triggered. However, when she reaches Clause 7, her expression changes. The penalty is stricter, and the clause requires her participation in combat training. She hesitates and asks if she truly must fight. Kyle answers firmly. If she fears combat, there is no reason to pursue stronger magic. Then he asks her directly, what is her true purpose for learning magic? Iris admits that she initially wanted to surpass others. She enjoys praise. The thrill of winning and standing above her peers excites her. She wants people to admire and look up to her. That is why she began studying magic. But recently, something changed. She has started to genuinely enjoy magic itself. Watching her skills improve, feeling herself grow stronger, it is fun. She does not even mind studying through the night. Hearing this, Kyle smiles. This is exactly what he wanted to confirm. Becoming a true magician is not determined by mana alone. It requires intellectual curiosity, a desire to explore the unknown, and a relentless thirst for growth. Without these qualities, one cannot advance. These are the defining traits of someone worthy of the title Companion of Mana. Iris has always wanted to become a combat magician. Since the day she first learned magic, she has wanted to grow stronger. With renewed determination, she signs the contract properly, completing the agreement. Kyle expresses his hope that she will one day become his reliable companion. The word companion makes Iris blush intensely. To her, it sounds almost like a proposal. Flustered and embarrassed, she hurriedly leaves the room, leaving Kyle confused about her reaction. Leon Hart, who witnessed everything, quietly reminds himself that Kyle should be more mindful of his words, especially given his natural charm. Urgel, also present, watches with visible concern. Later that night, when Urgel finds herself alone with Kyle, she hesitantly asks if he plans to marry Iris. The question shocks him so much that he nearly chokes on his water. He quickly assures her that he has no intention of getting engaged with anyone before turning 18. With the looming crisis threatening the world, he has no time to think leisurely about love or marriage. Relieved, Urgel shyly adds that when Kyle turns 18, she will be the same age as Kyle. Just like her beautiful mother, she believes she will grow into a beautiful woman as well. After openly expressing her feelings, she rushes out of the room. Unfortunately, Kyle completely misunderstands her words. He assumes she is merely thinking about her future prospects. Then he recalls her family history. Urgel's mother once belonged to the noble Helheim Baron family. After the family fell from power and their rank was downgraded, her father and brothers died, while her mother and younger sister are rumored to still be alive, though their whereabouts remain unknown. Kyle realizes Urgel must carry that burden silently, perhaps feeling too guilty to ask for help. Determined to investigate, he quietly decides to look into the matter. A few days later, Kyle prepares to leave the mansion. Iris appears unusually upset when she sees him departing in a hurry. Observing her reaction, Count Frantel begins to suspect that his daughter has truly grown fond of Kyle. During their brief exchange, Iris becomes angry at Kyle, but suddenly clutches her stomach in pain. She remembers his warning. Think 3 times before getting angry, or the penalty will activate. Count Frantel immediately understands. The contract's magic has enforced its terms. He calmly advises Iris to control her anger, assuring her the pain will fade once she regains composure. However, her frustration only deepens, and tears well up in her eyes. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, Kyle senses that somewhere behind him, Iris is likely muttering complaints about him. After returning from Impelum, Abel visits Kyle and reveals that he brought back a large shipment of grain. Curious, Kyle asks why he invested in it. Abel explains that after hearing Kyle's analysis, he had a strong intuition and decided to follow his lead. When Kyle asks about the quantity, he is stunned. Abel purchased 100 times more grain than he did. Abel laughs and assures him that even if the investment fails, he will not blame Kyle. However, Kyle is completely confident. They are about to make a fortune. Half-jokingly, Kyle asks if Abel always has such luck, like someone who constantly wins the lottery. Abel replies that he has never even tried buying one. The scene then shifts to the training grounds, where Kyle's father is practicing his swordsmanship. Kyle arrives after being summoned, carrying a towel. His father thanks him and asks about his stay in Pelham. Kyle confirms that Count Frantel treated him well and that he had a comfortable visit. His father then mentions a letter from Count Frantel. In it, the Count describes Kyle teaching Iris magic. Kyle briefly explains the situation, including Iris's difficult personality. When Kyle asks if the letter contained anything else, his father hesitates before revealing that Count Frantel also brought up the possibility of an engagement between Kyle and Iris. However, the Solitarian family does not practice early engagements, so the matter would have to wait. Kyle understands immediately. If he wants control over his future, he must grow stronger as quickly as possible. He asks his father to handle the engagement discussion on their side. His father agrees, assuring him that he will not be pressured about marriage for now. Setting his sword aside, the Marquis speaks more seriously. He tells Kyle that he never intended to force him into a political marriage. Though he and Aisha never formally married, it was not because of her lower status. In fact, Aisha herself declined a formal title. She once served as a maid to the late Marchioness and felt guilty stepping into that position after her passing. With two young masters still grieving their mother, she believed it would be inappropriate to claim the role. All she wanted was protection for herself and her child. The Marquis confesses that he truly loved her. They chose each other freely, and from that love, Kyle was born. For that reason, he wants Kyle to marry someone he genuinely loves, regardless of status. He admits he has not done much for Kyle until now, but from this moment forward, he will support whatever path Kyle chooses. Kyle is taken aback. He cannot tell whether this is guilt speaking or genuine fatherly affection. Still, he remains cautious. From his perspective, if the youngest son, far from the line of succession, were to form a powerful political alliance through marriage, it could destabilize the family. In Kyle's view, Rempton values family stability above all else. Until the succession is secure, Rempton would avoid anything that could spark internal conflict. It sounds like typical reasoning from him. Kyle calmly states that he understands. For now, he will continue playing the role of the harmless youngest child. After receiving permission, he leaves the training grounds. Rempton notices that Kyle avoided calling him father and sidestepped mentioning Aisha further. Holding a necklace in his hand, Rempton quietly wonders if Aisha resents him as well. Walking down the hallway, Kyle reflects on the conversation. Suddenly, he realizes he forgot to mention the spoils from the dungeon. The discussion about his mother and Duke distracted him. He debates whether to return and report it now, but decides against it. He had instructed Leonhardt not to report to the Marquis until he did so personally, but he is unsure whose orders Leonhardt would ultimately prioritize. After thinking it over, Kyle lets it go for now and heads toward the library. On the way, he unexpectedly runs into Duke, the Solitarian family's third son. It feels ironic, given that he had just spoken about him with Rempton. Duke has grown taller since their last meeting. Though he is only 2 years younger than Kyle, his physique is far more developed, likely due to early knight training. Kyle has heard that Duke recently became a lower-ranked knight. Duke eyes him suspiciously and asks why Kyle is in the main house, reminding him that he was once banned from entering. Kyle calmly explains that his confinement was lifted after he was recognized for his contributions to the subjugation squad. Hearing this, Duke narrows his eyes and accuses him of plotting something again. Duke has always harbored deep resentment toward his younger brother, Kyle, who is 2 years his junior. He believes their mother, Aisha, died prematurely due to the stress caused by Kyle's illness and behavior. On the day Aisha took her last breath, Kyle rushed into the room and, in his confusion and shock, asked why she was silent despite her son being there. Duke revealed that their mother had just passed away. At the time, Kyle was frail and emaciated from his terminal condition. Overwhelmed with grief, he lashed out at the world, bitterly saying he could not believe she had died before him. Those words ignited Duke's fury. He confronted Kyle, accusing him of causing their mother's death through the constant stress of his illness. In Duke's eyes, Kyle was responsible. But Kyle, equally distraught, demanded to know who was to blame for his own incurable disease. Crying, he lamented the miserable body he had been born with. Unable to control his anger, Duke struck him. He had endured his resentment while their mother was alive, but in that moment, he reached his limit. Duke severed ties with Kyle, leaving him in agony. Kyle understands that the wounds from that day have never healed. It is not a conflict that can be resolved easily. Because of that history, Duke cannot believe Kyle has truly matured. He demands that Kyle return to the annex and never step foot in the main house again. However, despite the tragedy of the past, Kyle refuses to accept such treatment now. Calmly, he asks Duke whether he has the authority to override the head of the family's orders and expel him. The question infuriates Duke, who raises his fist once more, only for Adolf to intervene. Adolf firmly tells Duke not to strike their brother, especially within the main house. He even suggests that Duke apologize. Duke refuses and storms off. Once Duke leaves, Kyle grows suspicious of Adolf's perfectly timed appearance. He suspects Adolf may have been watching from the start. The two briefly discuss the past incident that shattered Duke's trust. Adolf places a hand on Kyle's shoulder and tells him that he believes in him. Kyle immediately understands why Adolf has been quietly observing him all this time. After expressing his gratitude, Adolf reveals that he has been personally training Duke in swordsmanship. Yet no matter how much Duke practices, his skills remain average. His talent for aura has clear limits. Adolf then suggests that Kyle, having overcome Hermamu, should consider learning swordsmanship as well. Kyle politely declines. He chooses to head to the library instead, preferring knowledge over unnecessary confrontation. Soon, the two walk off in opposite directions. As Kyle walks away, a troubling thought begins to form. Adolf's actions feel unnatural. Training Duke, someone with only ordinary potential, does not align with Adolf's usual practicality. Adolf is not the type to invest time without purpose. At the same time, the effort seems excessive if the goal were merely to provoke Kyle. Then another memory resurfaces. In every recorded route of the fantasy defense scenario, Duke never survives beyond the rebellion. No matter the path taken, the result is the same. That pattern suggests a disturbing possibility. Adolf may have been directly involved in Duke's fate across every timeline. Yet, even with this realization, Kyle cannot determine the reason. There may be a hidden truth about Duke that he has yet to uncover. The scene then shifts to Leon Hart, who has returned to his homeland on leave after reporting to Rimpton about their trip to Impelum. When Rimpton asks whether anything unusual occurred during the journey, Leon Hart deliberately withholds information about the dungeon loot, honoring Kyle's prior instruction. Rimpton orders him to continue guarding Kyle and to ensure his safety. For a brief moment, Leon Hart prioritizes Kyle's trust over the authority of the family head. After concluding his report, Leon Hart visits his father. The two spend time fishing together, where his father casually asks whether the young master Kyle has matured. With a faint, satisfied smile, Leon Hart confirms that Kyle has indeed grown far more responsible than before. Leon Hart never imagined he would remain Kyle's bodyguard for this long. At first, he intended to leave the position and return to the Celtian Knights to advance his career. Now, however, he finds himself uncertain. He recalls their journey to Impelum when Kyle mentioned wanting to buy him a new sword. The blade Leon Hart had been using was too fragile to withstand the full aura of an advanced expert knight. If Leon Hart unleashed his complete strength, the sword would have shattered. Because of that limitation, he had always restrained his aura in battle. Leon Hart was stunned that Kyle noticed something so specific. Kyle even expressed guilt, believing Leon Hart missed the chance to earn a proper sword through merit because he stayed behind as his bodyguard. Fortunately, Leon Hart now possesses a new sword, easing that concern. When Leon Hart tells him not to worry, Kyle firmly replies that he should care, because Leon Hart is his knight. Those words strike Leon Hart deeply. The Marquis Rimpton has never said anything like that to him. Rimpton already has numerous loyal aides who have served him since youth. Compared to them, Leon Hart feels lacking, whether in skill or personal bonds. Sensing his son's doubts, Leon Hart's father offers simple advice: follow your heart. Leon Hart has always been the type to see things through once he commits. It was the same when he joined the order. Though their family holds the title of a baronet house, they were nobles in name only and could not afford a proper swordsmanship tutor. At 15, Leon Hart took the entrance exam alone and earned his place in the order through sheer determination. His father smiles and says Leon Hart simply has not realized what he truly wants yet. Leon Hart quietly agrees. For Kyle, he is currently the only one standing at his side. As night falls over Rempton's mansion, Adolf seeks out Kyle after learning that Abel attempted to recruit him. Adolf appears both concerned and irritated. He warns Kyle that Abel never acts without hidden motives and advises caution. In truth, Adolf cannot afford to lose any more strength after Jerome's death. Even if Kyle is only a first circle mage, he is still valuable, and his potential for growth is immense. Kyle, however, understands Abel's intentions clearly. Abel's approach simply proves that he now sees Kyle's worth. In fact, Kyle himself is thinking strategically. To survive and eventually defeat the dark immortal threatening the continent, he will need the strength of the Saltation family, a prestigious house of swordsmanship. And for the family's future stability, Adolf's ambitions may one day need to be stopped. Adolf then casually brings up the rumor that Abel has been purchasing large quantities of grain. Kyle smoothly redirects the conversation, claiming he is also buying grain, but only for magical research purposes. This makes Abel's investment seem even more suspicious in Adolf's eyes. Before leaving, Adolf hands Kyle a magic book, encouraging him to grow stronger so that one day he may support his elder brother. Then he departs. Outside the room, Urgel has been standing quietly. Adolf's maid approaches her and bitterly asks if she looks down on her as well. The maid reveals that she became Adolf's spy because her family is being held hostage. She had no choice but to obey his orders. Urgel listens in silence and then coldly orders her never to appear before Kyle again. The maid mocks Urgel, saying she is fortunate to have no family left to restrain her. After delivering that remark, she runs off. A spirit creature materializes beside Urgel and gently suggests asking Kyle to search for her family's whereabouts. But Urgel shakes her head. She feels too guilty to burden him further. That is precisely why she resolves to grow stronger, for the sake of the one who saved her. Kyle successfully demonstrates second circle magic and feels a surge of excitement after finally casting a fire arrow with complete control. At just the right moment, he achieves the second circle, marking an important step forward in his growth. Urgel, who has been watching him with a smile, quickly runs over and asks if he plans to rest now. However, Kyle calmly refuses, explaining that he still has important things to take care of. Kyle then reveals that he is planning to travel to Prienus to recruit a new talent. The moment he says this, Leonhardt immediately refuses to allow it. Kyle asks for a reason, but Leonhardt replies that Kyle already knows why. Urgel looks confused, but Kyle soon recalls the truth. Prienus is widely known as a city filled with distractions, including busy markets, auctions, and all kinds of entertainment. By Kyle's own standards from his past life, it is not a suitable place for someone his age. Leonhardt then brings up an incident from the past. The last time Kyle visited Prienus, he got involved in risky activities and lost everything he had. The situation became so bad that he was even captured, and Leonhardt had to step in and rescue him. After that experience, Kyle promised never to make such reckless choices again. Knowing this history, Kyle understands why Leonhardt is strongly against his request. Even so, he continues to insist, explaining that he is not going there for trouble and only needs to visit the arena for a quick task. Instead of agreeing, Leonhardt becomes even more concerned. He cannot allow Kyle to return to such a risky place, especially now that Kyle is finally making progress in his life. Leonhardt then turns and leaves the room, telling Kyle to remain at the mansion. Kyle tries to stop him, but Leonhardt does not listen. Urgel also shows clear frustration with Kyle's decision, making it obvious that she does not support his plan either. Left alone, Kyle lets out a deep sigh as he thinks about what to do next. He cannot afford to waste any more time. This may be his only chance to track the movements of Saren, a key character from the game Fantasy Defense. Saren has strong potential and solid abilities, starting as a swordsman with the capacity to grow into other skill paths with proper training. Because of his powerful skill, Kyle wants to recruit him early, knowing he will play an important role in dealing with a dangerous enemy in the future. The reason Kyle is so determined to go to Prienus is because Saren is currently fighting in the underground arena there. The scene then shifts to that arena, where the announcer introduces the undefeated champion of the region, known as the Sword Demon, Saren. At first glance, Saren appears weak and unimpressive, causing some spectators to doubt him. However, a more experienced viewer quickly corrects them, explaining that Saren may look weak, but he has reached this level using nothing but a single sword. There are even rumors that his personality changes completely the moment he holds it. Saren faces 3 challengers at once. Without hesitation or fear, he charges toward them. His sudden aggression frightens his opponents, and they try to run away. However, Saren does not allow them to escape. He defeats the first opponent with overwhelming force, then swiftly chases down and defeats the second, and finally finishes the third. The crowd erupts with excitement at his fast and decisive victory. As Saren stands alone in the arena, he begins to hear a strange voice urging him to continue fighting and to keep defeating more opponents. For a moment, the pressure builds, but Saren manages to resist it and regain control of himself. He drops his sword, and his body gives out as he collapses on the spot. When Saren regains consciousness, he finds himself restrained and locked inside a cage, looking weak and exhausted. A nearby guard wonders if they should give him medicine, but another guard stops him, explaining that Saren's body has an unusual ability to recover on its own if left alone. The guards then begin talking about him, noting how he is known as the Sword Demon despite being so young. They also mention rumors that Saren has been moving from one arena to another, with no place to call home. He does not even know whether his parents are alive. The only thing he truly knows is his own name. One of the guards expresses surprise that someone like him even has a name and asks what it is. The other guard replies that his name is Saren. The scene then returns to Kyle, who estimates that Saren should be around his age at this point. Using his knowledge of the game, Kyle is confident about Saren's location and situation. Determined to move forward with his plan, Kyle decides that he will find a way to reach Prienus and recruit Saren as the 4th member of his talent acquisition project. At dinner time, Kyle and Urgel quietly put their plan into action. They mix a small amount of sleeping medicine into Leonhardt's food, hoping it will make him fall asleep early. Later that night, when everything seems calm and silent, Kyle carefully opens his door and steps out, trying not to make any noise. Urgel follows closely behind him. They move slowly through the corridor, believing their plan has worked. Just as they are about to leave, Kyle suddenly pauses and asks Urgel why they are sneaking out in the first place. In that very moment, they realize something is wrong. Leonhardt's voice comes from behind them, calmly asking the same question. He has already figured everything out. Both Kyle and Urgel are shocked as they turn around and see Leonhardt standing there, completely unaffected. The sleeping medicine had no effect on him at all. With a simple release of his aura, he pushes them back and shows that he is fully aware of their actions. Leonhardt then asks Kyle what he is truly planning to do in Prienus. His tone becomes firm as he turns to Urgel and scolds her. As the head maid, she should have stopped Kyle instead of joining him. Hearing this, Kyle quickly steps in and defends her. He explains that Urgel did nothing wrong and that he was the one who convinced her to come along. Leonhardt lets out a deep sigh and begins to explain the situation more seriously. He tells Kyle that the security in Prienus has become even worse since his last visit. The city is known across the continent for its dangerous environment, making it especially unsafe for someone like Urgel. He also points out that while Kyle has the power to protect himself, causing destruction in such a place would lead to major trouble. He asks Kyle if he truly wants to create that kind of chaos. Hearing this, Kyle suddenly gets an idea. He looks at Leonhardt and calmly confirms that he does intend to cause a major disturbance in Prienus. He admits that Leonhardt is right about one thing. He cannot handle everything on his own. Kyle then reveals his true intention, saying that he plans to destroy the underground gladiator arena and free the people trapped there. He explains that many young fighters are forced to battle without choice, and he cannot ignore their suffering any longer. To succeed, he needs Leonhardt's help. Kyle lowers his voice and speaks with emotion, saying that he has been thinking about this for a long time. He cannot stand the idea of people his age being treated so harshly. His words deeply affect Leonhardt. The seriousness in Kyle's tone begins to soften Leonhardt's expression. Kyle, on the other hand, quietly realizes that this kind of honest and emotional appeal often works on him. At the same time, Kyle knows that his plan is not entirely false. He truly does intend to save Saren, and freeing others along the way is a real goal. A few days later, the Lord of Prienus, Riddle Remington, takes notice of Kyle's success and approaches him with a smile. He praises Kyle for his skill. However, Kyle shows little interest and calmly says that he is getting bored. He wants something more exciting. Riddle quickly understands what Kyle is implying and decides to personally escort him to a more exclusive area. As they walk, one of Riddle's servants quietly asks if it is wise to give Kyle access to such high-level opportunities. Riddle simply responds that it does not matter for now. Riddle had heard rumors that Kyle had become more mature, but after seeing him in action, he is convinced that Kyle has not changed at all. Earlier, Riddle's father had informed him about Kyle's arrival and wondered about his purpose. Riddle had confidently assured him that there was nothing to worry about and that he would handle everything himself. He dismissed the rumors about Kyle as exaggerated stories and believed that Kyle had simply come to the city for entertainment. After hearing his son's confidence, Riddle's father leaves the matter in his hands. Meanwhile, Riddle quietly plans to take advantage of Kyle and gain everything he can from him. Riddle then leads Kyle to a restricted area, a place where only a few are allowed to enter. He continues to speak politely, presenting it as a special experience. Kyle follows along without hesitation, but deep down, he is thinking about something entirely different. He is looking forward to the moment when everything Riddle values in this place will be brought down and destroyed.